people in the audience, we're going to start the meeting. Okay, it's now 7 o'clock on April 8th. Welcome to the Shelter Island Town Planning Board. I'm going to take roll call. We'll start with David Kriegel.
Here.
David Austin.
Present.
Marcus Kasich.
Here.
Julia Weisenberg is here. Matthew Fox, sorry.
Here.
Sean Davey.
Present.
And Greg Cranford.
Here.
All right, first order of business is we're going to review and act on some bills. We have invoices from the Rayner Group. That's Joe, who's here, our engineer. Pardon?
Minutes first. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, sorry, my error. Let's go over and approve the minutes from the March 11, 2025 meeting. Jessica sent that out to all the board members. Did everyone get a chance to look at those?
Yes.
Any additions or concerns there?
No, looks good.
So I need a motion to approve those.
Motion approved.
Sean, may I have a second?
Second. Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you for catching me on that. All right, now we will proceed to go over the bills. First up is the Rayner Group for services from Joe, our engineer. This was for the month of March. That totaled $4,550. And I just always like to give the breakdown of that so you know which applications were being worked on. So the bulk of the bill came from Crescent Beach LLC, the Row Subdivision, Ballard, which is on Nostrand Avenue. And then we have 7 Cheekwood Avenue. So of those, the wetlands application, in this case, would only be 7 Cheekwood Avenue, and that amounted to about 13% only of the bill. So I need a motion to approve the Rayner Group bill, the invoice for $4,550.
I'll make a motion to approve the Rayner Group.
Okay, we'll have a second on that. Sean, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Second was from Academy Printing, and that's a fun thing. Those were your name signs. So David, Greg, and Sean, you received your name signs for a total of 90. Huh? Did they spell it?
No.
I was going to say, was it worth the $95? Okay, so those were the 3 name signs for $95.55. So would someone like to make a motion to accept the printing of the name signs?
Motion.
Okay, and second?
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carried. And the last one is for the one wetlands application, Cheekwood Avenue, which is back in our jurisdiction. So that was from Teresa Mason, our environmental consultant, Hampton's Environmental Land Planning. And again, that was only for $75. So I'll need someone to make a motion to accept the $75 for Teresa Mason's
I'll make a
invoice.
motion for that.
Okay, David makes a motion, second.
Second.
Second, Matthew, thank you. And everyone else?
Aye.
Aye, great, motion carried. Okay. Before, I'm just going to change the order just a bit here before we discuss the seeker determination for Cheekwood Avenue. Would anyone object if I just kind of shuffle those around and we start with, is that fine? We'll start with 3 and 5 Borough Lane lot line adjustment, extension, sorry. Yeah. And let me pull that one up. So they asked for a little bit more time on this, paid the fee to do so. So basically, the applicant's representative sent a letter on April 1st, 2025, wherein the applicant's failure to meet the condition of the board approval within the time specified is an excusable occurrence, and an additional 60. Oh, again, there's a little bit of a typo, Richard, on the resolution. You'll just see on page 2, again, there's just an artifact probably from a template. It says 60 and we've got it's 60 to 90. Do you all see that? So,
Yeah.
so maybe if you could just change that, Rick, on, So again, I'm on the third sentence down. Additional 60 or quote 90 days is appropriate for the applicants to complete the conditions of approval. And now therefore, with due consideration, the planning board resolves as follows, that the planning board exercise its power pursuant to 111-43 of the town code to grant the applicants a time extension of 90 days until July 8th, 2025, in which to meet the conditions set forth in the board's approved date of October 8th, 2024. Can I have a motion to accept that?
I'll make a motion to accept that.
Marcus, I'll need a second. Greg, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mission carried on that one. All right, second one is West Neck Creek Cottage LLC subdivision, also an extension. This is resolution number 7-2025. Let me just make sure we don't have a similar typo on that. Is it good? Second one, okay. I got. Can't get the second page here. All right, so whereas the planning board considers that in the circumstances presented in Matthew Sherman's March 31st, 2025 letter, the applicant's failure to meet the conditions of the board's approval within the time specified is excusable, an extension of sketch plan approval for a period of approximately 6 months is considered appropriate. Now therefore, after due consideration, the planning board resolves as follows. The planning board exercises its power pursuant to 111-43 of the town code to grant the applicant a time extension of approximately 6 months or until October 14th, 2025, in which to meet the conditions set forth in the board's approval date dated October 8th, 2024. Motion?
We discussed it to comment on this.
Of course, yes.
I chose 6 months. The applicant, Matt Sherman, did not ask for a specific time.
Okay.
He did state that it would probably take him another year, because they have to get health department approval and so forth. That was not actually conditioned yet of, because this is actually a sketch plan.
Yeah.
But I just, no reason to bring it back here in 2 or 3 months when we know it's gonna take longer. So I use 6 months, so hopefully you're okay with that.
Yeah, I agree.
It's reasonable.
I think it's okay. Yeah,
I'll make a motion to approve.
thank you. And a second? Matt, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Resolution carried. Okay, now, just shuffle these around again. Okay, so, our next responsibility is to look at the seeker determination, which was prepared by Kim Gennaro from PW Grosser. Just so you know, Kim is on, if there's anything that the board members wish to ask her about that. Before we proceed with discussion of this application, though, I am going to ask Greg Cranford and David Kriegel, who are two newest members who are not acting on this determination, if you wouldn't mind maybe taking a seat or a little break or using it as a respite, and then you can come back to the table when we move on to the other applications. Good, Greg, or okay, yeah.
Do so.
We just decided that was best practice because when you're at a table, sometimes in discussion, you wouldn't want to accidentally suddenly just like comment on something and spoil the record, so just to be safe.
Good call.
Yeah. Okay, so we all received this from Teresa, I mean, from Kim Gennaro. So this was determined to be negative declaration. I know you've all had a chance to go over this. Fine tooth comb. I would like to have a little discussion on this and see what, if there's anything that you noted in it, any concerns. So I open the floor to- Yeah,
The consultant has prepared a draft calling for negative declaration. You have to decide whether you
Accept.
I thought it looked very thorough.
okay. And is there anything that you want to note about it or any changes?
On me right now.
I have some comments whenever.
Gosh, on, Chuck.
So in the main document, I don't have any problem with the negative declaration generally. I'm just looking for consistency in language. And so the first thing is, the first paragraph says, the planning board has determined that the proposed action will not be a significant effect on the environment. From my perspective, I'd prefer that it explains we hired a consultant who made a draft, and then if we choose to, we accept or support it. We didn't individually make the determination, so it's just perhaps a clarity or process, if that's reasonable.
Well, let me just comment. So it's a document prepared for you.
Yep.
So you will ultimately either be adopting that language or not.
Yep. Yeah, so I think you may see it as semantics. For me, it is, we have accepted the determination made by a consultant that we
We're
hired.
making it,
Gotta own it.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's fine. I don't know if that's typical. That's when to me, it's a little bit of a process, but maybe it's semantics. And then I don't know if you want to go through kind of line by line, but there are a number of areas, a handful of areas. My understanding is that this is a determination on significance. And there's a number of areas in the language that does not use the word significant, and whether it is an oversight because of just being repetitive, or for some reason some other language is used. And so I can go through it line by line. It's a bit painful, but I'll say,
You know, the first sentence that you noted right in the first paragraph, you probably also saw that that's, again, spelled out that way on page 3. There's
Yep.
a similar phrasing, I have that in my notes too. Same thing as the planning board hereby determines. That was
yeah, and that's fine. I mean, if you adopt it and it seems semantics and then whatever, that's fine. That's just my
I'm
reaction.
wondering if, Sean, I think that in my read through, it felt to me like a place where it didn't say significant is because basically it was saying there's stuff going on here. It didn't rise to the level of significance. That's why we didn't say it was not significant. That's how I read it.
Well, we can go through a few of the examples.
give us
I'm a little,
some-
I guess, part of also my focus on process is that if the consultant's job is to say it's significant or not significant, that's all she should do. And so, to me, I think that's just process. So, for example, in number 9, in the last paragraph, it said the action would not result in the impairment of the quality or character of historical, archaeological, et cetera, whatever. Should that say should not result in this significant impairment? I mean, I don't know if the scope is really just for her to determine significance. I would be looking for that.
If I may, this
Yep.
is Kim Gennaro.
Mhm.
That language is directly out of the SEQA regulations. It's
Okay.
whether the action results in the impairment of the character or
code.
quality.
Okay.
Yes. It's
So
directly 617.7.
So maybe if you don't mind quickly with me, maybe you can say, so in number 11 on creating a hazard to public health, that's also direct, it's not.
Correct, correct.
Okay. Number 13, the language material conflict, is that
It's that the action, yes, and the regulations is.
the regulation uses
A
material?
material conflict.
Okay. Let me just quickly look through to make sure.
Makes sense.
That's material, yep.
The same 14, 15,
Yep.
16.
Okay, gotcha. And then similar, and appreciate your indulgence in the EAF parts.
Yes,
In flooding, for example, it says would not increase the potential for flooding. Should that say not significantly increase the potential
No.
for flooding? Okay.
no, that was lifted from your code, so no.
Okay. Impact on land,
What's the number on that one, Sean?
it's in the EAF. And I'm trying to pull it up, but impact of land, there's a last sentence there that says something about complement.
Compliment neighboring.
Is that within the scope of your determination? Is that,
It's typically, yes, what we would look at, the impact on land use and community character not only is it adverse, but is it complementary?
Okay. Those were all my comments on it, so appreciate your indulgence if that's coming directly from the code. I was just
You're
looking for,
welcome. And I'm sorry, my camera's not working, so I do apologize.
problem.
All right, so I guess that, does that get your answer for you? I mean,
That gave me my answer specifically on that, yep.
so do we agree that we'll leave the phrasing in then, as it is, as we should?
She's keeping it to the code, so.
Right,
We don't need, the code is by itself adequate. I don't think we want to disambiguate even more from the code. The code has its own problems, right? So stick with the language.
anyone else, is there anyone else that has anything
You know,
that,
in our previous discussions, we went over a lot of this. I think this secret determination is correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, in consulting with our attorney, it has been done in some townships where we just verbally accept this and then it's kind of rolled into the final determination on the application itself. But as I had explained to Rich and he agreed that was fine, I'm more of a stickler to keep those two separate and make them two formally, separate encounters. So we rule on this and then later we have a discussion about the actual application and decide on whether to issue a wetlands permit on that application. So rather than trying to roll it all up into one. I hope that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. We talked before in like in the early days of, well, also that we need to get to the secret declaration
Yeah.
decision, and then we can decide on the actual permit.
Right,
But we need to get this first and get, I think tying it in the bow with a resolution saying whether we take or not is key. I agree. So I'd like to make a motion that we accept this negative declaration as read.
Second.
any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. So Rich, I guess we have a sort of a template kind of ready to go on that one.
On the,
A rough template on the negative declaration, so we
there's a resolution ready to go.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
not changing anything in the, as I refer to the documents that, that prepared.
Mhm.
So ready, the resolution's ready to go.
okay. I just want to double check, that's why I'm still calling it draft.
Yeah, no, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's fine.
Okay, okay. All right, so we'll take care of that, Jess, after.
So let's be clear, our vote we just had, which accepts this negative declaration, should we do a separate vote for the actual resolution, or is that?
No, it should be the
That's what we
same.
just did.
It should-
Okay,
If you were okay with
Yeah.
everything.
Just
you
double
should
checking.
adopt the
Yeah.
resolution.
We
That
just
should be your
okay,
vote.
just making sure.
Don't worry.
Being also a stickler for process.
Yes, I love it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll have David and Greg come back to the table. Thanks for waiting.
Missed such an exciting time, I don't know if you noticed.
We adopted the negative declaration, yes.
Oh, resolution.
We adopted the resolution, that's what we just voted on.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Being pedantic, just like me, it's good.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to close the business meeting then, and then open our work session.
I guess, do you need to make a motion to close?
We do, yes.
Yeah,
Would someone
I'll
like
make
to
a
make-
motion to close the business meeting.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Sorry.
All right, so, all right. Okay, so Elliot Bausman, we did the extension before, okay?
Yep.
On the Radigan lot line adjustment, we did that as well. That was at our last meeting. We just did Borough Hall Lane lot line adjustment a few moments ago. Defoe and Shearer, we did those as well, and they have until June 10th, 2025, plenty of time. Those were all of our lot line modifications. Moving into our subdivision applications, the Bloom Minor subdivision, we did that extension for them, and those applicants have until August 11th, 2025, still ample time. All right, so first one's going to be the West Neck Creek Cottage subdivision, which again, we just did our resolution few moments ago. So we did that, we granted them the extension. All right, Fowler? Anyone up for Fowler? Discussion?
Okay.
And Joe prepared a memo for us.
Yeah.
Joe, I feel like you're so far away. Okay.
I need a bigger table.
Yeah, I feel funny with you being over there. Did you want to come to the podium or? I don't know.
Whatever you.
Yeah, maybe come to the podium.
I said the key thing is to make sure the audience online can hear you. It's all you have to worry about.
Having watched online, typically you can't hear
It's
what
hard to
anyone
hear.
over there is saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly, I was thinking about that.
Like
Sorry,
even
Joe.
even when we talk to Rich across the table there, I wonder if everyone can hear you, so.
I'll speak up.
Okay,
you go.
that's
There
good.
you go.
Okay. Review the preliminary plat.
Yeah.
That was submitted, dated February 13th, 2025. There are a couple of minor mapping issues that have to do with the open space parcels that are along. Those open space parcels should really not be called open space, they should be called conservation easements, because they are actually easements on the proposed lots. Now, and this is a similar issue that occurred with the sketch plan. The sum of the areas of these open space parcels is 33 square feet short
Yeah,
of what's required
Oh, they didn't correct.
10%. You're talking about moving a line a fraction of an inch to make up that difference, but it hasn't been done. It will have to be done, and it's something that can be done at the final, because it's still, being that this is a major subdivision, we still have a final application. This is just a preliminary application.
Let me.
Sean has a question, go ahead.
My advice, because you have to have a hearing on a preliminary application should meet your subdivision regulations.
Yeah.
And
Certainly.
Joe indicated, he actually told them in his memo back in November, to correct that.
Yeah.
So I think that should be corrected on the map before you deem the preliminary map ready for, I know you're not doing it tonight. You have to make your secret declaration, but the preliminary map should be complete and compliant with your code before you accept it and schedule for your next roads.
Yeah, it's like starting the hole already dug. Why don't you wait, let that start at least from a basis? Christians, we know it's a very minor change on their part.
I know that pointed out already.
Can I ask a quick question? And
Sure.
maybe it's not customary to subdivision. What's the area of the entire undivided lot? Because I couldn't find it in any of the documents.
It's up in the upper left-hand corner by the north arrow.
Square feet, 700 and something thousand.
Oh, I see.
They
Yeah,
have
there's
acres,
acres.
they have acres.
Yeah,
Yeah.
703, 148.
It's big. It's a big space.
So it's a large parcel. It's 2-acre zoning, 80,000 square foot zoning. Technically, they have enough road frontage. They don't need to build a road. They could actually get between 7 or 8 lots if they wanted to. And they're just proposing 5.
Question?
Yes.
Go ahead, you go first.
I just have a question about that. Are they then able to come back in the future and request further subdivision?
I don't know if any of the lots, because it would have to be,
Well, Eastern lot might be, the eastern lot's over 4 acres, I don't know if it's over enough.
yeah.
In theory, unless we at the end put a requirement to keep it, so that's an option we can always add as the end, but sort of like we're ahead of ourselves.
I don't know if it's a suggestion though, I mean, if it goes forward. If they're creating a lot that is big enough to subdivide. And you could even consider doing this if it was close to being big enough to subdivide. You might ask them to file the covenant. That Rob Friendly called a large lot scenic easement that precludes future subdivision. Now, you put that in your resolution too, but I would have them file something so that, and it's particularly the easternmost lot, because I know the eastern lot, I don't have the map in front of me, but the eastern lot is over 4 acres.
Yep.
And, you know, you're
That's right.
2 acres up, so. That, by the way, that would be a condition of your final approval.
Joe, do you want to finish the whole summary? Because I'm sure we all have.
Sean had some, he's been blocked twice.
It's a lot of little discussions.
I think
I don't know, whichever way.
I let Sean do his, and then we'll go back.
And then we'll
Yeah.
go back to the room.
Okay.
On the conservation easement, you said it's short. What about driveways? And would that, if they're coming from the road, is that not taking away from?
The conservation easements are shown on the map, and they exclude the areas where driveways are proposed.
And I guess the question I'd ask are our driveways proposed as straight? In driving by it, you see the hills like this, so it's likely that driveways are going to wind in there and perhaps take up more space than like just saying they're coming in straight on. So we should just look at that.
The existing driveway serves the house that's there, and that comes in on a curve, and that's proposed to stay. The other driveway areas are 40 feet wide, 20 feet on each side of the property line. So that gives you the ability to come in.
Meander in there.
Meander in.
Okay, as long as you're comfortable with that.
Okay.
Yeah, you get to continue now, Jeff. It's all right.
Thanks. Okay, one of the other items, the mapping items, is specifically in section 111-15F. The code requires that the boundary line of the exterior be a heavy, solid line, and they have dashed lines. And it might sound nitpicky, but the easements, the conservation easements are dashed, the building envelopes are
It's
dashed,
hard to tell.
the
Yeah.
topo is dashed. There's a lot of things that are being dashed, so typically, those should be solid and a heavier line. And the lot lines should also be solid and not as heavy a line. Let's see. Now, they do show building setbacks for principal and accessory structures and other accessory structures. And for some reason, the setbacks go all the way to the conservation easement up along the road.
Mhm.
And they shouldn't, because there's a 25 or 20-foot structure setback from those conservation easements that the board agreed to. So those are
Oh, they're showing, yeah.
the items. Now, if they're all relatively minor in nature, they can be corrected without any substantial change to the subdivision. So, but I tend to agree with Rich that the preliminary plat should conform with town code. Moving on to secret. This is a type 1 action. It's a type 1 action in the Shelter Island Town Code. And coordinated review is required, and that's going to be similar to what took place with 7 Chiquit. In this instance, the involved agencies are the Suffolk County Department of Health Services and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So the board will have to identify and notify those involved agencies and indicate that it would like to serve as lead agency in this matter. Along with a letter requesting lead agency status, he would send a copy of the application, the long-form environmental assessment form, and the subdivision map. And involved agencies have 30 days to respond to the request. My conclusion has changed a little bit based on Rick's information. So I thought that the preliminary plat was that the items that needed to be changed did not rise to a level where we couldn't go forward. But apparently they haven't.
Well,
So,
just based on the fact that it was asked of them before, and then I did find it funny that it showed up again here, and then you said it, then you mentioned it again, so.
Yeah.
Let's say have them go one more round, see
so,
if they can get it right.
so let's,
Yeah,
Well, let me just say this, you can make yours, you can declare lead agency now, you don't have to wait on that.
okay.
Yeah, you can determine lead agency. You don't have to wait till every little bit of the application, you got an application in front of you, it's basically complete. It's technically incomplete, so it's basically, so you can make a, you should decide if you want to be the lead agency. That's something you should do tonight.
they have to coordinate with the involved agencies.
Well, right.
Pending coordination.
Send out the lead agency coordination, yeah. I mean, first the board has to decide you would like to be lead agency, I suppose. So if you do that, then you have to send out the lead agency coordination.
Can I just ask also, so we have to decide on a environmental assessment group. So just as we did with Cheekwood Avenue, for example, we happen to use PW Grosser on that one. Is there choice on that, or of which agency to use, or
Why do we have
which
to-
environmental
Why
consultant?
can't we just use Joe?
But, yeah, I don't
Obviously, I was
know.
asking why we can't just use Joe, but we have to use a environmental group, right?
Sure.
I've done them in the past before.
Yeah.
Okay, no, actually, that's why I'm asking. I'm saying, is it customary?
Or, you know?
I don't know what your practice has been in terms of who you
He
take.
does it anyway, right?
You want to, it's a type 1 action. You're gonna have to do a full part 2 and part 3 EAF. So whoever you think is suitable to do that,
No, that's why I was asking you. Is it, do you use an actual consulting firm? Do you just use your existing engineer? I'm asking, I'm posing.
you probably don't want to do it yourselves.
No, I don't want to be doing it myself.
I think we did PW Grosser just because of the impact. We want to make sure that it's kind of more removed and had a kind of a third party more so. But I think this is very reasonable. I think,
Yeah.
and team has more than enough expertise to handle this, in my opinion.
Is that okay with everyone else?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, just checking.
Yeah.
And then I also know that we have to include the fire commissioner?
Yep.
Shelter Island Fire Commission.
Yeah, he wouldn't be an involved agency
Involved.
technically, but he'd be an interested agency.
Exactly.
And
We always do.
Joe sent out a checklist to our clerk, Jessica, because you have handled that before the referral to the different, to Suffolk County Planning Commission. So Joel will be doing that again, is that okay, or doing the referral?
Fine. Well, the referral form has been completed. I sent it to Jessica.
I saw it, yeah.
She just needs to get the requisite copies of plans and the EAF and the application form.
I guess the question is, do we send that out with the document as is, or do we ask them to revise before we send it out?
For the 33 square feet,
Yeah.
I don't think that's significant.
And the dotted
Like,
dash lines and
Yeah,
things.
you can send the cover back with the EAF and the application, I think is required, with the cover letter.
Yes. I think maybe a cover letter explaining, I think some of the things, these are things we're asking them to do, those might change, but it doesn't,
You could either get a
Significantly
copy of
impact.
Joe's memo.
it doesn't significantly impact that these are feedback we're going to give them, we'll be reviewing. Yeah, that seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Do they need a SWIP?
No.
No.
Only if they're clearing more than 1 acre subdivision.
These are just, I'm writing through the questions I had.
Good.
What else? Well, I guess I just wanted to make sure that we have consensus on the board about the park area, or the conservation easement, as Joe pointed out, should be.
I don't. I have a lot of questions about it.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Reading your report from the last one, it said the board had looked favorably on the solution. And I'm wondering why, because anyone who builds on this lot is going to build as close to the water as they possibly can. I mean, people don't buy waterfront to be by the road. So it seems to me that fairly narrow conservation easement is really a giveaway of great benefit to the owners, because they get a tax contribution. They get a tax write-off, if I understand how the system works with conservation easements. So I guess it's really a question, why because this is the open space is kind of a last resort in the subdivision section. The park seems to be the preferred method of giving something back to the town in a major subdivision. So how did we arrive at the open space? Because I wasn't here, obviously.
I think, I'll give my consent for it. I think part of it was we thought the better chance we have of keeping Nordstrom Parkway mostly a tree, basically trees all along the side, was a more positive for the town than just having like a park over on the side. Because that means they could have, in theory, cleared all this right up to the road. I think that was a lot of the thinking.
Yeah.
That's why we got there.
The difference with a park that, say, took a swath of the site is that would be open to the public to access the water. Whereas this is a set aside that nobody's ever going to use.
Quick comment. You can't require a
Public.
park to be open to the public.
What you can do with a park area is you can require, your code doesn't deal with this very expressly, but you can require that they create a homeowners association to own and maintain it. That's a not-for-profit corporation, they have to form it, they have to deed it to that corporation. Or you can say, as long as your town board is willing to accept it, you could say deed the park area to the town of Shelter Island. Then it's open to the public, but you can mandate that they make it open to the public. They can choose to do so
Right.
if they deed it to the town.
But they don't have,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a thorny issue because there's a lot of these parks around the island that have been the product of subdivisions, which are not maintained and are kind of forgotten and ultimately act as if they're someone's property and not public anymore.
That's not the way it should be done.
No, it's true, but that seems to be historically what's happened. So going back to this, as I read the code, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, first, as a prerequisite, they need to have a deal with either city, state, conservation, not-for-profit, to agree to purchase it or purchase the conservation easement prior to the approval of the plat.
Well, let's take things separate.
Yeah.
If you have a separate park area, a separate deeded parcel,
So this was the open space scenario.
well, so if they were creating separate deeded parcels, which is the way your code seems to me to read, that land would be a separate parcel of land, separate tax map parcel, it would not be on the tax books, would not be taxed. And that would either go, as I said, to a property owners association. Maybe if they wanted to, they could deed it to Peconic Land Trust, if you agreed in Peconic Land Trust, let's say, wanted to accept it.
And if they
Or
want,
they deed it to the town of Shelter Island. That's a deeded parcel. You can separately require conservation easements over parts of the property. You have that power under the subdivision chapter of your code. I don't know how extensively you use that, but you could require a conservation easement. A conservation easement is traditionally accepted by the town.
Mhm.
It's not the conveyance of fee title though. It's an encumbrance on the private property. So they would still own, let's just say this open space as shown on the map that Joe referred to. Let's say that's a conservation easement. And right now, that's the way it's designed to be.
so they're selling their development rights.
Not selling it, they would be deeding, they would be granting for no consideration a conservation easement to Shelter Island Town over that area. It's a grant, it's no consideration, they don't sell it. They give it, you can make it a condition of your approval. And then they have to grant it to the town. They
It says
still
as
own
of-
it, but it's encumbered.
It says as of the date of, I mean, I'm just reading, right? As of the date of the final plat approval, they have to have, and there are three things. Contracted to purchase all or a portion of the lands covered by the subdivision plat for the purpose of open space, parkland, other similar conservation purposes, or acquired or contracted to acquire the development rights to sell or a portion of the lands covered by the subdivision for the purpose of public access, which didn't happen, or use for open space, parkland, or similar conservation purposes.
They refer there in the code to a park parcel, a separate deeded park parcel, which we just talked about. And what the code is, I think, trying to say is,
This is after the part. This saying, if you're not going to do the part and the board agrees to it, you can do this set aside.
they have park fees as an alternative. Because of the code.
And then I've saved the best part for last. Because it says where the portion of the lands being acquired or the portion of the lands whose development rights are being acquired constitute at least 30% of the total area of the lands covered by the subdivision plat, not 10%.
I just read all that today. I think what it says is, if they meet these certain prerequisites that you're talking about, they're not subject to the 10% park requirement. In other words, if they create lots that are large enough, they have a higher, lower density, or if the subdivision is done in connection with, let's say, the town of Shelter Island buying part of the property, then they do not have to do a park area set aside. But that's not the case here.
So I don't see in the code where it says they can do exactly what they're doing, which is not building a park and having an open space easement. Unless unless they have someone agreeing to do it and it's 30%.
That's how I read the code. But apparently the board, before I was here, decided to accept a conservation easement in lieu of park area. And I understand why the board would do that.
It's been done historically a lot.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's right.
Well, it says you can do it, but it also says that if you're going to do that, it's 30%, not 10%. And maybe I'm not reading this accurately.
Our beautiful code.
Well, this was one of the few actually very clear paragraphs.
Well, I do remember in the early discussions, we were, so as David just said, the concern was the scenic vistas, which is from our current comprehensive plan in terms of Nocturne Parkway is very well known for that look. And so we were concerned if we put it elsewhere that they could just build, as you said, David said, you could build right up to almost the edge. But we initially asked for more of the setback, the structure setback from the parkland, and they pushed back a little bit. And I remember we gave them 25, 25, 20, and 25. So there was that one lot that we even gave them less to use, 20.
Yeah, I don't think the building envelope is, nobody's going to want to build up at the road, I don't think. There's no precedent for that notion except.
The structure easement is not that's why we, I think, decided not to worry about structure easement as much, because nobody's going to do that. What we really worried about was clearing all the land.
But the open space easement doesn't address lot clearing.
Doesn't address what?
Lot clearing. Someone can say,
Oh,
you
no,
have.
no, no.
You can't touch it.
Well, I couldn't find, it's very hard to find. I couldn't find the section on what exactly open space means, other than how it's used.
It's not really clear.
Okay, but I don't see what precludes someone, unless there's a limitation on lot clearing.
We could put a covenant in the final plat.
A traditional conservation easement, in my experience, would prohibit clearing or otherwise disturbing that land. No structures, no clearing, no disturbance.
I agree, but this isn't called a conservation easement.
That's why
At least in the-
which is why we're saying.
On the map, it should not say open space, it
Got it.
should say conservation. Let me just say, the section of the code that you were referring to, David, this is in the area about park dedications. Notwithstanding the provisions of couple sections above, the planning board may waive the requirements that a subdivider set aside a park or recreation area or pay a park fee in certain circumstances. And the part that you were referring to, first of all, one of the requirements has to be that the state of New York, county of Suffolk, or Shelter Island town, or not-for-profit conservation group, has to be contracting to buy part of the subject property. And here's where the 30% comes in. This is 7B in 11134.1, 7B.
Right.
Where the portion of the land is being acquired, or the portion whose development rights are being acquired, is at least 30% of the total land area in the subdivision. So if they're conveying to the town less than 25%, then you can't waive the park requirement. But if they're at least 30% or more of the land's being acquired, or for which the development rights are being acquired, if that constitutes at least 30% of the subdivision acreage, then you could waive the park requirement. So there are limited circumstances under which you're supposed to waive the park requirement. Again, I wasn't here when the board made an earlier determination on this, and I'm not suggesting that, that I want to upset that. I do think there's things in your code that could be clearer.
Yeah. I think there's also the fact that we didn't make a decision. right? So we had a conversation about, they said, can we do something like this? It's like, well, bring it to us and we'll decide, right? So we haven't said this is okay.
Right.
We said, give us anything, it's like, no matter what, it has to be bigger than that, blah, blah, blah. And so they've come back with this so far, right? So nowhere in here we said we're accepting this as is. And as we go through the process, it may change, we may ask for larger changes, and we'll go through public.
Well, I think you've read the sketch plan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sketch.
So that's very, very informal.
Yeah.
The next step in the major step in any major subdivision is the preliminary approval stage.
Yeah.
I think that's the key stage.
Does the conservation easement go with each property? And does the tax benefit go with the future buyers of
I
those
wouldn't go
properties?
too hung up on the tax benefit. It doesn't amount to much. Yes, on this map, they're showing what would be a conservation easement on the frontage of each of the 5 lots. The tax benefit that you get is supposed to be the extent to which that easement diminishes the value of your property. It's probably not diminishing the value of the property very much. They should still build on the lot. They're not going to probably build, likely not even clear, although you prevent that in the easement near the road. So it probably doesn't have much effect. Don't tell them that before they grant you the conservation easement.
A couple of questions, if I may. And still just thinking about driveways and the like. Are the path the driveway comes through, is that driveway their property, or is it a right of way through the conservation area, even if you're saying it's not included in the calculation? What is the legal status of their driveway?
Those 20-foot wide strips are on each lot, and it would probably wind up being a driveway and conservation and utility easement, so that you could bring your utilities in and the driveway in, and both lots can use it up to wherever it ends, and then the lots would veer off, or the driveway would veer off into each lot.
So part of my thinking is that, what is our precedent for one continuous space that is this, versus now you have an intrusion, several intrusions into the space? Are they actually separate conservation areas because the driveway breaks them up, in that regard? And so what is the precedent we have in terms of allowing somebody to drive through a conservation easement, et cetera, et
I
cetera?
know we've done, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, I remember, there's been like, where they've done sliced and diced in different pieces, or all together at one spot. It's varied over time. I think generally it's been more like one space, right? But there have been those.
It's short, right?
Yeah.
The way it's shown on the map, there are 1, 2, 4 separate conservations, because they're split up by both the existing driveway access that goes into the existing house, and then they're split up by 2 adjacent 20-foot wide strips belonging to lots 1 and 2, and then to lots 4 and 5. The way it's shown on the map right now, each lot could have its own separate driveway. Some communities, sometimes if you have adjoining driveways, you can make them share a common driveway. Right now, it's set up that everybody would have their own driveway.
Yeah, I mean, I think it may be the most elegant solution in trying to keep nostrand. I'm just trying to think of what the precedent we're setting in terms of, chopping it up and of sorts.
Well, I guess if I understand David K. correctly, what you're saying is like you're questioning what the benefit of this easement is in the location where it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, as from a conservation standpoint, if you're talking about contiguous areas, it doesn't really, in terms of, maintaining species diversity, whatever, it doesn't do much. Peconic Land Trust would probably say, no, we're not interested in acquiring a 50-foot wide swath of land with 5 driveways in it.
Rick, can I ask you a question, just because someone asked it before about like where the structure setback starts, and then you've got, let's say on most of these lots, 25 to the conservation area, right? That could be cleared. I mean, that could conceivably, you could take down the trees, you could put
Yes.
turf, you could,
It's only the conservation zone.
okay. And then the open space itself, or so I keep saying open space, because I'm looking at open space. The conservation easement is, you're sure that that can be protected? We can put that in?
Oh, yeah, your code does allow you to take easements, presumably that includes conservation easements. Sounds like you don't have a real practice of doing that. I will say that where I come from, they're used extensively, and they would prohibit clearing. I mean, they don't allow you to touch that area at all.
But there's nothing to stop that last 25 feet.
Right, the easement would be protected from being cleared, but then that structural setback, you could clear up to the edge of the conservation easement from the, on the building side.
There's no way we're gonna.
I guess I was just really curious, because when, what David Kay just brought up, if you remember that the fourth lot asked for that 5-foot difference. Matt, do you remember that, guys, about having it 20 feet? And that sort of contrasts what David would have assumed, saying that they're probably gonna build more this way. So I'm wondering again, what that was about. I mean, we granted it, but
Tennis court.
Probably. That's what I was thinking.
tennis court?
Yeah, something like that. Tennis court, pool, something.
Yeah, there's one
So it's
further
like
down the
that
road
opposite.
that's right up there.
Right, that's kind
Yeah.
of wooden.
You have it kind of separate from the house, so you don't make noise in the house. It's like, that's what people do. And I think the big thing about this is, like, yeah, I think part of our conversation around this was like, well, yeah, they could also build it, slice this into 8, right? And and then basically give a spot that's like, that's just open space, and slice it up much tighter. So it was basically, we were trying to make a compromise that would keep larger lots. I think that's how we ended up kind of here. I'm not sure if it's the right answer, but that's how, just kind of understand how we got there.
Does anyone know why they're doing 5 lots?
I think they wanted to do more, and that was part of the conversation, was how to keep it not so many lots. Now, again, I don't know, I personally am not against more lots. It's like, that's a really big lot for, like, I understand that, like, we have a housing problem in Zion, right? So it's like, why not, it's like, it could be, these are 4-acre lots, it's huge.
That
Not really. I mean,
housing
not the
problem,
con-
that's not for waterfront houses, that's not what the housing problem's about, in all fairness.
Yeah.
So, having more lots in an area that is really quite beautiful and undisturbed, I think is totally contrary to how development on Shelter Island happened personally. So I think the goal of having fewer lots is certainly a better approach.
I was curious, I looked at the town GIS map. How wide are the lots on Nostrum Parkway? So 14 lots, the average is 225 feet. No, they're sort of in that range. That said, there's a 470-foot lot, there's a 340-foot lot, there's a 307-foot lot. So
180.
I don't know, I'm not a developer, but you'd think a big lot, price per acre is, you may get the same amount of money with fewer lots. I don't know. I just wondered if anyone asked the question to them.
The minimum, just so you know, minimum lot frontage is over 160 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother discussion.
That's the code. So that's how we got there. I guess the question now is, I think this will be good, because I think this foreshadows the conversation we'll have going to the next stage, right?
Yeah.
Well, and certainly all along Nostrand and these properties, as part of that, is very wooded and very beautiful and an important aspect of nature. And so to the extent that the conservation easement is a little bit out of the norm, maybe we can talk to them about clearing in the setbacks, putting in some covenants that will guarantee more wooded area rather than just leaving it to chance.
I think that's fair.
Well, that's what I brought up. Like, I wanted an extra 50 feet.
Yeah, we wanted even more. And I think, yeah.
It's not, the existing house is
We don't say
300 feet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, we have a
Like there's
chance
plenty of room.
Yeah.
to go back to this, revisit this, and we can,
We got quite a few steps to get there, right?
maybe we go back to asking for the extra 50 that we tried before.
I think, again, this is the whole process, right? We're not trying to say everything in this phase. right? We're getting to the next phase by accepting, going, this is that is the preliminary, and with some changes, that's what we're going to review. We're going to go to the public, we're going to have conversations about it and see, and we'll get a read about what is felt based upon both what's in the code, what we feel as a planning board, and what the public feedback is. And we'll decide then.
Well, I'm guessing the developer will come back, if you ask for more, say, hey, we're only proposing 5 lots, but we could get more lots.
This is exactly what I'm sure they'll do, and that'll be a great conversation to have. Right?
But is the developer going to build houses or just sell the lots? Does anyone know?
You got to assume that somebody's going to build someday, they wouldn't do it otherwise. It's
No,
gonna
but
take-
are they going to do speculative housing?
I don't know.
You know, so,
And I don't think we get to decide
yeah,
that.
it doesn't matter.
What we're deciding is subdivisions.
An engineering question. I noticed they did 3 test holes and they stopped before they hit water. In a waterfront site, would you think it's of value to go until they hit either ground or salt water? They stopped at 17 feet.
The health department requires the test holes go down 17 feet, and that's just to determine whether or not the soils are suitable for a sanitary system. That's what those are for.
They're doing it for that purpose.
Each of these, I don't know, it could be each of these lots will have to have a test well put on so that the water can be sampled and it can be determined if it's adequate. And at that point, the test well is put in, we'll have a better idea of where groundwater is on these lots.
So they did what was necessary to get through the next stage, to get it to what?
The health department just wants to know that you have permeable soils.
Right, but
Sandy soils.
don't we as a body have the ability to try to determine the capacity of the site, to how many gallons a day you can pump?
Not really, that is the health department.
That's how.
I think somewhere in the, we're able to ask for whatever kind of engineering test, whether geotechnical or whatever we feel is appropriate. And maybe it's not appropriate to ask for that kind of thing, but it would seem to me where people are, we could have 30,000 square feet of houses along here. We might want to know.
The health department, I don't know for sure, Jill, what groundwater management zone is here. It's probably a 40,000 square foot minute flow, right? The health department?
Yeah.
Groundwater management zone 5, maybe, I'm not sure.
No, we're 4, we're groundwater management zone 4.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
300 gallons.
so no public water,
Right.
yeah, 300 gallons per day, 40,000 square foot lot minimum.
Correct.
Again, that would be, when they started building or doing something, they'd have to go through that process, right? They have to go through the,
Well, they have, as a condition of preliminary approval, they should be required to get health department.
Yeah.
And on the face of it, they won't have a problem getting help.
I mean, there's a precedent for the board, I think it was this board asking for storage tanks down the street.
For which plan?
Doing a bootleggers.
yeah, that wasn't in the first, that came through the process, I think. It wasn't like from the very initial conversation, I believe. That's before my time.
Right, so I mean, the question is to make that kind of a determination, we need to know where groundwater is.
Well, health department requires a 3-foot separation between groundwater and the bottom of your leaching pool.
Right.
Given that there's
That
more than
won't be an issue
17,
here, yeah.
being that there's more than 17 feet before you get to, and you don't hit groundwater, you can put a sanitary system in for a single family residence within that 14-foot distance.
Right, well, that addresses the issue of contamination of well from septic, but not on the capacity of the ground to support as much pumping as someone may want to do. And maybe it's not our job to determine that.
It's the health department's job.
But I think the planning board has also in the past required low pumpage.
In certain areas, like in Bootleggers on the south side, they have a water problem over there. On the north side, they don't.
And that,
generally a higher elevation than bootleggers. And I
Yeah.
certainly not an expert, but I think the general assumption is that this area and the woods behind it have a pretty good amount of water.
Yeah. I believe so.
And so the kind of flows that way and then comes down Nostrand based on elevation.
and that's something that the health department will be looking into because they're going to require test wells. And that they'll determine that the depth to groundwater, where the saltwater interface might be. And then they'll pull it back up so that they're just in freshwater. And if they don't hit good water in one spot, then they can put it in another spot.
So you're saying this question will be answered when the health department does it, and we'll get that report, and that'll be part of their package, and.
Right, and that's why,
Part of the coordinating.
that's why applicants have to go and get health department approval before they file for a final application. The board wants to know, be sure that, yep, we can put sanitary systems here and there's fresh water here.
David, does that satisfy your curiosity on what to do with the water?
I don't know enough. That's
Yeah.
geologist or hydrologist, but yes, for the time.
Is there anything else?
You have
No, I
anything
think-
else?
I think that's good, Joe. Thank you.
I do have questions about the application in general that they
Yes.
filled out. It's a lot of blanks.
Actually, the top sheet wasn't. Did you notice that? The top sheet, the actual checklist.
There were also some conclusions, which I don't think is right, but I don't know what bearing they actually have on.
This is still preliminary, so,
Any,
Greg, did you need something?
I think before you guys were added, there was only a requirement to have 5 copies.
I
And
see.
Yeah,
so
so.
you don't have copies of some things that came in before then.
Did you get the digital version though from Jessica? You have the,
You can get the
it's
digital.
on your town email.
I've got some of that in my email, but I don't think I have.
You-
Well, if you bang around the SharePoint,
It's all in the
until you
SharePoint.
find the
It's all
folder
there.
for this job,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of stuff.
Have fun.
It's all there.
If the board is going to be requiring that the applicant provides the map,
Yeah,
ask for additional
Yeah.
prints.
let's do that then. So you also didn't probably get one, right?
I just printed it out myself.
Okay, all right. So we'll get you one, Greg. All right, so Rick, just to review, we're going to go back to the applicant and ask them to fix the
There you go.
calculation on the easement.
Yeah, I guess you would just send a letter back saying, well, I don't know what your practice has been, I mean, you could send a cover letter with Joe's memo and say, please note, you have to adjust your,
That's what we usually do.
Yeah.
Okay.
But are we talking about the 30-something feet, or are we gonna go back and say we think the setback's inadequate? Or
Yeah, I think we're gonna go just with this, with the idea we'll go through the process on setbacks and everything else. So I think that's a
you're gonna
broader.
probably want the applicant in front of you
Yeah,
to discuss,
Yeah,
changes that are discretionary.
I think at that point, we can ask for more, ask questions, get some more answers on it. We also still have to hear from the public.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
So that may raise other things that we haven't thought of.
Exactly.
All right, so we're gonna, so let's take care of that first. We'll do that cover letter memo before we proceed with the other things. But you said that
Send that to lead agency coordination letter?
we're gonna do that too, yeah.
Yeah, both of.
So
With.
do we need to have a vote on whether we want to declare ourselves as lead
You
agency?
should, voice vote's fine, but you should do it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion then that we designate ourselves as the lead agency on this major subdivision.
okay. Good.
Or two at one time. Sean, you want, okay, Sean second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, aye, that motion carried. I just put this away first. All All right,
If
what's
you're
next?
comfortable, Joe, Crescent Beach.
Oh, Crescent Beach, you have to back up again. Okay.
The applicant representative here might be different.
Yes, would you like to go first then?
Sure, that'd be great. My name is John Bennett, and I represent the property owner, Carlina. We have two separate 4-lot configurations, which are there for build purposes. This is a 3-lot, proposed 3-lot subdivision. So, I'm just trying to get myself further here, I'll start up top. But in any event, so we did submit some proposed plans, and Joe was kind enough to take a look at them. And one of the things, sure he has more comments, but one of the things that he wanted us to show was the lots without, we take how much of the lots are within those wetland setbacks. So we did that. And I have some small handout copies of that, as well as some large copies. I don't know if I have enough of the small copies, but I have.
Thanks. These all collated?
Yeah. And I'll provide now. Here are the large ones.
John, a question, the ones that you're passing out right now, are those the same?
Never seen these yet. They're essentially the same configuration, but Joe wanted me to back out Mr. Lombardi wanted us to back out the wetlands area. It's the same, the lot configuration doesn't change.
But can I just to clarify, is the ones that you sent on February 28th and you asked us to postpone, or these are now different than the ones I had previously?
They're not different in terms of the lot configuration, in terms of the overall size of the lot, yeah.
It's
In
showing,
terms of anything other than Mr. Lombardi's request that we back out of the lots, the area that's been, that's in the wetlands. That's all. So you're not looking at a configuration that's different, you're not looking at overall lot size that's different, none of that.
it's just showing that we're not, where you're not affected the wetlands.
Any more of those?
Yeah, sorry.
But the growth area, the lot area.
Gross area is the same, exactly, exactly. Gross areas are the same. Joe wanted to see the what are the books?
They're not actually putting the lots in the wetlands.
Can you explain what you mean, that the other one, the 4 or 5 lot, 4-lot versions are for yield purposes?
There are two 4-lot alternatives. This to show yield. And you should be aware that those are based upon a prior design. And I'll get you the letter because it was part of a letter that we received from the planning board and an application to put a home on this property, which is, I'm going to talk quite a bit about in a while. Those are based upon a design where the planning board has a letter saying this is a 4-lot yield. I'll bring that, yes, I'll get that. But the purpose for showing two separate 4-lot configurations is to establish yield. That's the way the subdivision process works. This is a 3-lot subdivision. So everybody gets that, right?
That's, your proposed is to do a 3-lot subdivision.
Proposing 3 lots.
Yes. Understood.
But
But you could do more.
every single subdivision that I've handled over the last 40 years, you always put in a yield map. Because otherwise you don't know what your baseline is. And that's always required. But be that as it may, it's important for everyone to understand that what is proposed is a 3-lot subdivision. We'll give you a little bit of history on this property. You have 2 lots up near the Serpentine Drive, taking advantage of this relatively flat area.
of the property. And obviously, those would be where the houses and accessory structures would go. And we would have no problem with an easement that prohibited building in these steep areas. Your code is a little bit behind some of the more contemporary codes in terms of how it deals with slopes. I think that's a fair thing to say.
Yes.
Okay. But what we've done is anticipate, based upon our InterScience Research Associates work on subdivision, as well as my office. So what you're seeing here is lot number 2 and lot number 3. Those would be the areas where those homes would be constructed within a certain area, which obviously is taking advantage of the flat area. It would, and the areas outside those building envelopes, if you want to circumscribe those building envelopes by notes on a map, which have the same effect as a covenant, but as a covenant as well, that's fine. We don't have any problem with that. And we would probably suggest that so that anyone buying these lots knows that they are limited to building in those areas. Let me talk to you about lot 1, which is the waterfront lot, and why is it configured this way? It's configured this way for the following reason. I'll hand this out for everyone's benefit. And it's an important part of the history of this property. This lot is configured essentially the way that a single-family residence was approved on this lot. Just a second. See on here. It's fighting back. This lot is to take advantage of a single-family residence that was approved on this lot by the zoning board of appeals of the town, the sub-county department of health, the Department of Environmental Conservation. It received a recommendation of approval from the planning board. And then the town board, because it was in excess of 6,000 square feet, and then the town board refused to take action on the application to build a house, despite the fact that there was a DEC approval, a zoning board of appeals approval, a planning board recommendation of approval, a health department approval. So, quite understandably, my client commenced an action in Supreme Court Suffolk County, and on August of 2023, Justice Hackney directed that the town board issue the permit for the house. Amongst other things, the Supreme Court Suffolk County found that it's not one of my favorite parts of the decision. The act of the town board in refusing to issue the permit is arbitrary, capricious, and violated constitutional guarantees of due process and violates my client's rights under the state and United States Constitution. Found that there was inherent bad faith by the town board, so much so that the court, this is unbelievable language, this is how bad the town board's actions. You don't have to read the decision. Normally, the court will limit its intervention in the subject application to directly closing the public hearing and affirmative vote to approve or disapprove. However, the town had previously granted 38 of the 38 special use permit requests, including one on the same date. Under these facts, the court concludes that the petitioner is entitled to the issuance of its permit. In other words, court was so taken by the town board's bad faith that they directed the town board to issue the permit, which had been issued by the zoning board of appeals, the DEC, the health department, recommended by the planning board. It's important that you know this history, because that's why this waterfront lot is set out in this configuration. Oh, and also, I think it's very important from an engineering point of view. I didn't hand these out. Oh yeah, it's all in the package. There was a speed use permit that was issued for construction on this lot, signed off by the then town engineer on May 27, 2021. So generally, the area where it speaks that was set forth in this application, everybody at the town board approved, and then the town board was directed by the Supreme Court of Suffolk County to approve the application for this house. And if you flip through the speed use permit, the package, it starts with the speed use permit, you'll see the various site plans and surveys showing where this house is proposed. It's the one waterfront lot. So that's why this waterfront lot is of the configuration that it is. It's a totally viable lot down there. That's why we've carved it out that way. So again, we don't have any issue with a 3-lot as opposed to a 4-lot. There is a memo from the town board that was part of this house project some time ago that made a determination that this was 4 lots. It might have been a little bit of a different configuration, tweaked a little bit different than the 4-lot, 2 different 4-lot plans that you see, obviously, because they were trying to show you alternatives, but nevertheless, there has been a previous planning board determination that this yields 4 lots, get that in the file. We didn't think it was going to be an issue, but to the extent that someone has an issue with the way we've drawn these 4 lots, we have a prior determination, and ultimately, we're here for 3 lots.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just since you're just as a seg here, I thought the ZBA determination 12/2020 had restricted it to 2 additional lots.
2 additional lots.
So,
Lot 1 and 2 and 3.
so we shouldn't be, so in the earlier, may I finish?
That's zoning board of appeals.
In the earlier submissions, you had 4 lots and you have 3-lot example too. So we shouldn't even ever consider the 4 lots.
No, that's not true, because the ZBA determination was never put into effect. Only if it was put into effect would that be binding.
It's not a binding, then it's the opinion that it was okay to do the Lot 1 is also not important either.
Excuse me?
Never mind.
No, I.
The fact that it wasn't enacted, their ruling or their judgment on it still is of importance, at least to me as one member. I won't speak for anyone else, but I just wanted to know, like, what your response to that, but.
We can quibble about that. I disagree, but we're only here for 3 lots, 2 additional lots.
Were these
Double check.
approvals extended? I didn't think they typically have a 1-year.
You know, what happened is the town appealed this determination.
It's an appeal.
Excuse me?
You didn't get to that part in time.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
you might
you
see.
have to understand something, though, and Mr. Whalen is a very skilled lawyer, will tell you this. That decision right now is law of the case. It hasn't been overturned. It has not been overturned. It's being scheduled for argument. But that is the law of the case right now. So it is res judicata for this board in terms of, you know, where you could put a house on this property. It's also very important, and the reason I'm giving you some of this background information is that you have a full speed use permit that has been signed off by your then engineer for construction of a single-family residence in the location where it's shown on this 3-lot plan. There's also a Department of Environmental Conservation permit. There's also a health department. So what I'm showing you is a lot that has been vetted by numerous agencies, lot number 1. And then, of course, the 2 lots up top, 3 lots, we have purposely put in an area that's relatively flat. So that's just an important consideration.
May I ask, so is it what you are saying currently, absent any ruling on an appeal by the town. This plan specifically with the lot at a flag kind of roll and where the driveway is was specifically approved, ordered to be approved by the court as is.
Absolutely.
But also, let's be really clear, what we're here to determine has nothing to do with that, right?
Well, it does, certainly does.
Well, we're
Well, it
here,
certainly does.
we're here at the early stage to talk about a subdivision, right? Dividing up the lot, dividing up this into 3 is what you're proposing. We have to go through that process then, right? Which is somewhat separate than what gets built on the lot.
It is, except I think it sounds like the court has basically already designated one specific lot and its space.
They haven't specified a
I'm
lot.
not saying that.
They just specified a building.
I'm not saying,
One lot, the whole
what I
thing.
am saying is that chose a location for one of the lots that is an appropriate place to put a single-family residence. Speaks to the recent permit that has, zoning board of appeals permit that has a recommendation of approval from the planning board. So there was a lot of thought put into the location for the waterfront lot.
That does not, pardon me, that does not prevent us, should we desire to request a change in configuration of the lots.
Oh, no, that's part of the subdivision process. My position.
That's the point.
That's why it's separate.
That's why I'm just trying to be clear
My
that
position would be, where else, can't tell me that I can't build on the water. It's in an X zone. By the way, which is very important, because the way I read your secret regulations, it's a minor subdivision. It's a major is 5 or more. And the only secret catch or trigger you would have is if you're building in a flood zone and we're in an X zone. It's on one of the surveys.
For now. The problem with FEMA maps is they're based on current sea level, as you know.
No. This is so, go look at the property.
No, I
Even
did.
on a remapping,
No.
there's no way in hell this is gonna be on anything but an X zone, even in.
Well, the Army Corps would tell you by 2100, it's a 6-foot sea level rise. And you'll still be probably okay there.
Yeah.
So, one of the surveys in the package that I handed out has a very clearly defined X zone, which is probably, probably at least 100 feet into it. The site plan. It's the erosion control sediment plan with detail and notes. And you'll see down at the very end, there is a serpentine, to use a word there, dotted red line where the V zone and the X zone goes right from the V zone to an X zone. And the house, the area where you would put a house is probably 100 feet deep into that. So from the seeker point of view, it's an unlisted action. It's a minor subdivision. There's no construction proposed in the floodplain. It's an X zone. We have proposed what we think is the natural development of this lot. One in an area that's gone through quite a bit of consideration and review, and the other two up on Serpentine Road were the flat sections of the property. So, and again, even if one wants to argue or quibble or whatever you want to call it about the yield maps, they're here for $3. And my apologies, I should have had that prior planning board determination of the 4 lots to you beforehand, but I'll get that to go for that.
Just some backstory, because I just got into the board
Yeah, of course.
process.
Of course.
So I'm sure Mr. Carlina and Mr. Stern were delighted when they got their approval. Is he no longer, Mr. Stern being the architect? So is he no longer pursuing Lot 1 as a building site?
It's.
I know it's approved and it's approved, but that's just, so he's still gonna build this house.
The town, I had to sue the town. So you're asking me whether or not he's pursuing it? I had to sue the town to get the Supreme Court to tell them, the town, to issue the permits, and then under Article 55 of the Civil Practice Law on Renewables, when the municipality files a notice of appeal, to stay, automatic stay. But that doesn't mean that the case isn't res judicata. If the appellate division reverses, start all over again. If the appellate division affirms, I'm going to not be on the town's door and asking for a building permit, an approval, and ultimately on the town board's, on the building inspector's door, and asking for approval for this Robert A.M. Stern house that's been designed at great expense.
So that's yes, that's all they want. So yes, no.
Well,
When they go for their approval, by the way,
Yes.
there's one permit that you miss.
what is that?
Suffolk County Department of Public Works for access on a county road by driveway.
Okay, well, that's in effect the ministerial permit.
It is, but you're on a steep hill and a curve.
That's
and
why.
Next to a bar. so-
That's why it's been designed the way it has been, and that's why the Stevie's permit was issued for that, amongst other things, that project. I thought it important to give you a lot of the history of this, because this is not something that hasn't, piece of property that hasn't been reviewed. Like, we're here for subdivision approval, but what did we do? We put the large lot number 1, where there had already been all of these approvals, and made sure that the other 2 lots up on the road are in the flattest areas. And again, as I say, we have no problem with any sort of covenants to keep any improvements whatsoever off those slopes. And I think that candidly, we should be congratulated, thanks for that, because what we've done is we have in effect superimposed some more contemporary design standards as they relate the slopes into this process. Extremely well thought out.
John, a board member had a question. Greg, go ahead.
Could you just, I'm trying to find the square footage of the approved. of the
Oh, I
house.
see, it was something like 11,000 square feet. I can get you that number. That's why we were before the town board. This was in excess of 6,000 square feet.
I thought it was a height issue, or was that the?
Yeah, the GBA granted the variance for it, yeah. It was a height variance, but this is why zoning board of appeals are made, because zoning looks at a typical flat lot. And it's where you take the height. So obviously on a lot that has this sort of topography, the height variance was in effect not a big reach for the zoning board of appeals.
I'm sorry to ask questions about this site.
No, please do.
But
That's what we're here for. I want to educate you and give you as many facts as I can about it.
what is the maximum height of the retaining walls that are proposed where this house is located?
I don't know. I can get you that information. I brought.
I'm asking because, you addressed the steepness of the slope where the 2 alternate lots are. And lot number 1 is extremely steep. And I'm just wondering,
You'd like to know what the height of the retaining walls are?
yeah,
I can get you that.
just an estimate.
It looks like it's terraced to some degree.
They're
It
terraced.
is terraced, it's fairly terraced, but, it's like a 50-foot grade difference, or 10-foot terraces.
No, well, let me not answer that. Let me get you the exact numbers on that. But again, we're not here for.
So I just
But
want
if you want, I'm more than happy to give you the information.
I'm just relating it to sort of how it works with the other 2 properties.
Greg, previous wetlands decision from this planning board and the special permit, I forwarded it to you. So the past decisions, and it does have some of their concerns, observations, and the measurements of some of those things.
I'll take a
So,
look.
yeah. I did one.
So I know this is, we're just trying to familiarize everybody with the proposed subdivision, but I thought it important to give you some of the history. And I thought it important to show you that the location of the lot number one, a large lot, was chosen because it's based upon a lot of prior analysis, a lot of prior approvals, a lot of interfacing with the various agencies. Again, the only board that hesitated in permit, town board and the Supreme Court directed that happen, and we'll see what happens in the appellate division. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't move it along, because even if the appellate division were reverse, what that would mean was, okay, then you have to go back to the zoning board of appeals for any house that's, because now the zoning board of appeals has the authority to grant approval. They've taken it out of the town boards. I understand the zoning code now, they've taken that out of the hands of the town board, houses in excess of a certain square footage, and put it to the zoning board of appeals, which is probably where it belongs. So in any event, there would be a house on that lot line, and generally the area where the house was approved, that large house was approved.
At any time, did you ever consider 2 lots?
No, but it's an 8-acre parcel, eight parcel and 2 acres on. Why would you consider anything but 3 lots? No.
Well, originally, he was gonna build it on the 8 acres. Originally, was the intent to build the house on the 8 acres without a subdivision?
No.
So there was always a subdivision as part of it.
No, we just decided there's no intention not to give up the right to subdivide, if that's what you're asking.
Well, that wasn't what I was asking.
So
I'm just
you were
looking,
asking about intention, and that would suggest that
well, looking at the
the
site
operation
plan,
of his mind was there's some desire to say, no, I don't want to subdivide it. That would never be my mind.
just so I understand, the original 10, 11,000 square foot house was based on the 8 acre parcel. I don't know if that was anyone's.
It was based upon a portion of the 8-acre parcel. It was going to sit where the house was sited.
But there was, in the original, and I'm not trying to.
You didn't have an active plan to subdivide at the time.
When it was filed.
My response would just be that's absolutely irrelevant.
But this
It's just a
drawing that I'm
question.
looking at, and it's reduced and I can't tell, is showing a single property line?
Yeah,
Single tax lot.
that's, yes, at the time.
Okay, that's what I meant.
Yeah, but you were talking about intention like that. It's an irrelevancy. We're getting into the operation of the client's mind before the subdivision applications. It's an irrelevancy in any event.
Well, if I can just interject, what I think the board members are asking is if the property were subdivided, would that house still be capable of being built on proposed lot line?
Yes.
Well, setbacks and coverage and things like that.
Oh, no.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, just look at it. It's a very, very large lot, and it clearly would be capable of holding this lot. There's no question there. I wouldn't have drawn the lot. That's the reason we made that lot so large.
Sean?
Yes.
So I was on the board at the time that your applicant came before with this wetlands permit, and I do remember, I don't know if it was you or his representative at the time, I'm assuming it was you.
It was me.
It was you, okay, so I do recall that, just as you are now, you sort of said that you deserved praise for not subdividing this up more, and that you were putting this.
Never made a representation to this board. I wouldn't have been foolish enough to make a representation that this.
You didn't talk about subdividing, because in fact, when I saw this application come back to me, I said, I was actually kind of surprised that you were back.
It's all
knowing that-
irrelevant, by the way. It's all
It may be
irrelevant.
irrelevant to you, but as a board
No,
member,
it's
I have a right
irrelevant as
to.
a matter of law, Chairwoman. It's irrelevant as a matter of law. There's no condition that was imposed upon the approval of any of these approvals prohibiting further subdivision. It was never offered, nor would it have been. So it is quite decidedly an irrelevancy to your consideration at this time.
John, we're asking you questions just to kind of get the big picture of this whole subdivision application, and so.
Yes, and
with
I'm
all-
going to answer
with all due-
questions. I'm going to respond to
Sir.
questions that are legally
Sir,
relevant.
with all due respect, may I finish my sentence? I don't even feel like I can ask.
Disrespectful.
I don't even feel like I'm able to get out a sentence without being,
Like the response.
I'm still talking, I haven't.
Sir, you are raising your voice unnecessarily
So is the chairwoman.
and being somewhat combative.
I'm trying to be,
I am now. I am simply asking for a certain manner of decorum. You were kind enough to say.
That has to be a.
You were kind enough to say you just wanted to give us some background. There's no reason to have an argumentative tone in your presentation, and you're eliciting that back because your tone is rather aggressive. If that's your choice, that's fine,
I disagree.
but your reactions are as a result.
You, sir, are creating your own reality. Thank you.
I have no preconceived notion about this at all. I'm just simply asking questions to try to understand. And I am actually known as a chairwoman who generally tries to be as diplomatic and respectful, and I give people ample time to ask questions, respond. I try not to interrupt. So I was simply just asking a question about that. But I do remember when you came before the board, that there was really talk about just the building of the structure and not subdividing. So again, just my own natural surprise when you came back and now you're asking for the property to be divided.
I have.
I'm just,
That is,
Get a full
that is a very value-based statement that you've made, number one. Number two, there was never an offer not to further subdivide this property. I never would have recommended that to my client. I certainly didn't have the authority to do that. If you want to go back and look at something in the record, fine, look at the transcripts, whatever it is, but there's never been an offer not to further subdivide this property. It's an 8-acre parcel that's capable of, even on a bad day, 3 acres, three lots. And your board previously made a determination that it was, that there was a 4-lot yield on this. So to the extent, if I may, that you're trying to maneuver into some prior agreement, either implied or tacit, that there would be no further subdivision, I am duty bound to respond to that.
but the positioning of where this structure will go on this particular lot one
Yes.
does have some influence or maybe significance to how we decide on the other 2 lots. So that's why I'm trying to gather all the information.
Which is the very reason, exactly the very reason why I am giving you all of the approvals that properly cite this house where it was cited pursuant to the speediest permit, the DEC approval, the planning board recommendation approval, the health department approval, the zoning.
So, ZBA.
So that, the background is to show you that the creation of lot number one is to dovetail into all these prior approvals. So on a bad day, if the appellate division doesn't affirm Justice Hackling's approval, all that means is the house has to go back to the zoning board of appeals and maybe it'll become the same size, maybe it'll be smaller, but it's still the most commonsensical location for a house on the waterfront. And that's why I'm giving you all this information. And I also wanted to know the history of it, because this is not a piece of property that has notice. So what I would like the board to do, because I don't know what your next step on a sketch plan approval is.
Well, we have a memo from our engineer.
Okay, I'd love to hear it.
I think I'm going to let Joe go.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you. Reserve my comments later.
Unfortunately, I was not aware of long and storied history of the property. So I reviewed all 3 maps that were submitted. We can talk about the 2 4-lot maps. Again, the 4-lot maps, one of the reasons why I contacted InterScience is I was interested in determining the area of the lots,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Joe, did you submit another copy of the memo?
I emailed it to the board.
Can I have a copy?
Jessica, do you have a copy of it?
It's rather strange that I wouldn't.
Jessica says you got a copy of it.
Excuse me?
You got a copy of it by email.
Does anybody have a hard copy of it? I didn't know where to get it.
Did we just see that today?
Thank you.
Just going back a step, the original sketch plan that was submitted on the property showed 4 lots. And it showed a park area that was on the water on Shelter Island Sound. However, in the park area was the required 10%. However, in the town code, you cannot include wetlands or buffer areas in the park. When that happened, when you excluded those, the park wasn't nearly acceptable. So they came back with 3 other plans. The 4-lot plan A has a single park area that's upland. It's a nice location. Something that I have is, it shows 4 lots. The lot that I was interested in was lot 1, because that's a flag lot. And it's a waterfront flag lot. So, in looking at the code, this lot has an area of 85,061 square feet. Tidal wetlands are approximately 5,599 square feet. And then it has this long flag strip, which is another 11,150 square feet. When you exclude the wetlands and the flag strip, the bulk of the parcel is only 68,312 square feet. Now, the town code doesn't specifically say that you have to exclude the flag strip from the area of the flag lot. But what it does say is that the planning board has Section 111-37A, all building lots shall at least comply with the requirements of the zoning ordinance of the town. Planning board interpreted this to mean, in the past, the planning board has interpreted it to mean that the bulk of the lot, which would exclude wetlands and flag strip, should at least meet the minimum lot size of the zone. Would be 80,000 square feet. This one has 68,000 square feet. So, and this just goes to the point of whether or not it's a 4-lot subdivision that yields 4 lots or 3.
Can you just show me the, I don't understand. Where the boundary of lot 1 is? I don't, I'm not, yeah.
4.
Okay, follow that around though. Doesn't it come along Shore Road?
No.
Wait,
Oh, wait, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it does come along Shore Road.
yeah,
So it goes along Shore Road, along the waterfront. Okay. And back and
all right,
around.
okay, all right.
Okay, so similarly, the 4-lot version B has a flag lot. Total area of the flag lot is 80,000 square feet, but when you exclude wetlands and the area of the flagpole, it's reduced even further. It's 60,636. So and the version B has 2 separate park areas. One is completely upland, one is a mixture of upland and wetlands. does meet the total area of upland meets the parkland requirements. But still have, reservations about whether that lot would yield for, the site would yield 4 lots. And that brings us to the 3-lot conceptual yield plan. And this is a plan that has lot 1, which is similar to what Mr. Bennett was talking about, and where a house was shown. Had some reservations about building on the lot, because I wanted to see some additional information. However, the information that was submitted tonight shows that with clearing and grading and retaining walls, it's possible to build on that lot 1. And then lots 2 and 3 are along Serpentine Drive. They have building envelope that are in a more favorable area where slopes are, for the most part, less than 10%. You mentioned before, we think that these building envelopes should be defined on final plat. There should be meets and bounds of the building envelopes, and there should be a covenant that goes along with the subdivision that discusses these building envelopes. I think that's really about it. A lot of my points were covered by Mr. Bennett.
The status of this drawing, this is a sketch plan application?
This is a sketch plan application. And it is a minor subdivision map. So I said would be planning, and one of the things I didn't point out is on lot 2, there's a 20-foot wide utility easement in favor of lot 1. So that will allow at least the water service come down from Serpentine Drive to lot 1. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Given the distance from the house to Shore Road, is that in the realm of fire department access roads?
Yeah.
And if it is or it doesn't really matter, it's just how you build it, but
Well,
is there an issue with, because it has to be paved then, is there an issue with the paved road crossing through the wetland setback? Which I think has to be, at least by town code, permeable.
If I may, we specifically engineered this and designed the house so that the driveway does not come within the wetland setback. That's why it's pushed further up. Shore Road. The original plan, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm sorry, the original plan had it within the wetland setback. And we decided to take it out of there so that that would not be an issue. It requires a little bit more cut and fill. The thought was the better policy would be to keep it out of
The 75-foot setback.
That makes sense.
But it is in the 25-foot
I think it's
adjacent.
totally out of the wetlands jurisdiction.
It's totally out.
Is it out? Okay.
Totally out.
Yeah.
Okay.
With
Less
respect
clear from the
to
drawing.
fire apparatus. With this fire apparatus, my understanding is it doesn't really kick in until the driveway or a road that serves a minimum of 4 structures. This would be just a single driveway. I'm sure that there are lots of driveways that may be as long. So fire department find a way to get in there and get back out.
Back out a long ways, I've done
What'd you say, Deb?
it. If we can get in, we can get back out. We can always back out.
It'll be a 300 or 400 foot driveway. That's what it is.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem.
If I can just make one comment, I think the solution of the two lots up on the hill is the most logical solution and works very well. I walked down there today and
It's the only place they go.
it's kind of obvious, but
And one of the other, the original subdivision that was proposed on lots 2 and 3 had a conservation easement area that extended along the areas of steep slopes, which is outside the building envelopes. So that's something else that the board could explore, because it's been taken off of this plan. But maybe it's something that the board would be interested in.
So have that instead of like a covenant saying that no development would be on the steep slope, instead make that the conservation part, is what you're saying.
Well, the conservation easement would prevent development on those steep slopes.
Yeah. But if you didn't do that, you'd have to put something in the deed, correct, Rick, about, you know,
I triple bank stuff like that. I would put a condition in the resolution. I would require covenant restrictions, and I would probably seek a conservation easement over the steep slopes as well. And the condition would be full, and then the covenant would be building envelope, so that, not, probably in this case, not only would you want to limit the construction to the building envelope, but you might want to limit the clearing to the building envelope as well. Because you probably don't want people starting, to clear down those steep slopes.
well, you also don't want clearing down by the beach. That was one of our concerns in the original.
Well, yes, you could ask for a conservation easement along the coastal area as well.
That was one of our concerns in the 2022 one, I remember.
And when you said clearing, does that include topping the trees?
That's a good question. That comes up from time to time. Depends how you word it. I mean, the way it should be worded, you shouldn't really be able to touch the area. You'll leave things in their natural state. It's usually a common phrase in a scenic and conservation easement.
Well, how do we enforce that if that were part of a covenant? Because it seems to be a problem here.
If conservation easement is properly done, the conservation easement would be granted to the town. Then it becomes a negative property interest of the town. It's a restricted property interest of the town, and the town can enforce a violation of the easement.
Something to consider when we get that to that point. Does anyone else have any questions for Joe?
No, I just wanted to go back, and I don't know whether it's for their attorney or not, but just to be clear, what process already has taken place or what have you with a driveway on that road that is a steep slope, so there's, you would think, a dangerous coming out of a driveway on that slope down there with the activity, with people coming down the hills, with bikes, with everything else? Is that yet to be determined by the state or something, or there are pieces of that that have already been approved?
Would you like me to respond?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, there's a SWIP plan, there's an Ed Hollander landscape plan, and it's been engineered with retaining walls, and that's all the package that I gave you. Extremely well thought out. This was a house that was designed by Robert A. Stern, who got this in the beginning introduction, and Hollander was a landscape architect. And it was designed to make sense. We had a lot of input from Bulgin and Associates, who has a story photograph here. Tom Lawrence in particular was very helpful. So it was designed with those very concerns because the homeowner wants a safe property as well. So, and we also designed it very carefully, as we were discussing before, with to make sure that it had a minimal impact on any sort of wetlands. So, yeah, it's a very, very safe design, plenty of site distance. That's why we pushed it up.
Site distance to the road coming out of the driveway, is that?
I mean, someone coming out of the driveway on the road is gonna have plenty of time. Someone on the road is gonna have plenty of time to see somebody exiting, entering Shore Road. Purposely, one of the things we took into account was actually sort of a plus of moving it further up the road to keep it away from the wetlands. It also increased the site distance.
It takes it off the curve.
Takes off the curve, yeah. I mean, this is a really well thought out house. I just wanted to respond to a couple of things. I'll talk about, I'm not gonna spend an awful lot of time responding, but I will in writing to Joe's thoughts about the 4-lot yield plan. And by the way, Mr. Lombardi's comments are always educated, reasonable, thoughtful, and I appreciate them. They're always a help in the process. Clearly, you want a SWIP plan for building on those upper lots. Those are usually, I think by state law, those come into effect when a building permit application is applied for. So we don't have any problem with that. You want to put that in a covenant that prior to the issuance of any building permit on those lots, the stormwater pollution prevention plan will be signed off on. I have no problem, however you want, in firming up these building envelopes. That's the reason we showed them on the map. They can be shown on the map, and as Rick said properly, it's like belt suspenders and then some. Notes on a map, restrictions on a map have filed in the county clerk's office where this is going to be filed, have the same effect as a covenant restriction. But we'll put it in the covenant restriction. We want to have an easement on there. Make sure that those areas outside the building envelopes are not touched. Nobody wants to clear this. You'd have a very significant runoff problem. Clearing it, it's just, that would be crazy. That would be self-defeating. So,
Sorry, John, I mean, just looking at this, lot 1 is basically going to be, from my assessment, just looking at, is going to be virtually clear cut in order to achieve the terrace.
no, it's, you have take a look at the sanitary plan, take a look at any of these plans. You'll see that the road, there's some cut and fill and retaining walls along the road, and then there's the house proper. But then you're gonna have like you're gonna have to stay out of the wetlands area, so it gets pushed up. You're gonna have buffers in the wetlands area, and then you're gonna have all these conservation easements to keep you out of this. So it's far from, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of, a fair amount of cut and fill, and there's gonna, and to level out the building area, but it's nowhere near totally clear cutting this lot, far from it. That's why we made it so generous, but we can show you that.
Do you think you'll be clearing, you'll have to clear beyond the sheet pile wall that you're showing just for the angle of proposed to install the imagine?
Those are usually, sheet piles are usually vibrated in. That's the whole reason why we use sheet piles during construction. I won't give you a construction methodology, but I've had plenty of clients that put in sheet piles, they're vibrated in.
No, normally,
Yeah,
but you're at a 40-degree slope here. I'm trying to imagine the piece of equipment and how you get it in
We'll
there.
give you a construction methodology. I'm sure Ed Hollander, and the engineers who engineered this plan, and the people at Rockaway and Stearns would have engineered the plan if it wasn't feasible. But that's the sort of thing that, if you want more detail.
I'm sure it's feasible. I think the comment was about how much lot clearing, and I don't know what the regulation is in terms of lot restoration. I mean, I'm sure knowing it how they're gonna plant specimen trees all over the place, so I'm not really concerned about it, but.
I guess I can't really say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Ed would probably smile if he heard me say this. Ed is not afraid to spend his client's money. But, they go into it willingly to have a wonderful plan. Wonderful plan. So anyway, just wanted to follow up with some of the stuff. I'm just thanking Joe for his, where the heck is it? Just trying to get a conclusion. Good question. Again, You'll lock in those building envelopes and what can and cannot happen, mostly cannot happen outside of them in any way that the boards and council feel comfortable. My, if you want a longer, long-form EAF, please ask for it, provide it. And again, my reading of this, since the construction will happen outside of a floodplain, and it's a minor subdivision, is that it's an unlimited action. I don't know how you guys do, seeker, it's interesting, is in terms of the public hearing, it gets a little bit strange. There is a case out there suggesting that you should make a determination of significance before you schedule a public hearing. It's a third department case. Never made any sense at all to me, because why, if you wanted to have input from the public, you should have it, I would think, before the determination of significance, but I'll leave that up to you. I mean, the way I've handled that in some municipalities is I've said, open up the public hearing, keep it open while you're still making your determination of significance, make your determination of significance, and keep the public hearing open after that. But it's a sort of a strange case. It's
Back, yeah, in the good old days, we did it both ways. If we had something that was really controversial, usually the board would not make its secret determination before the hearing.
Yeah, there's literally there's a third department case based upon the reading of the subdivision regulations of both the village and the town code that says it's improper to schedule a public hearing before determination of significance, which has every seasoned land use lawyer sort of scratches their head at that, because you think you want the public input. So what I suggested just as recently as the other night before the planning board of Southampton is schedule a public hearing, keep it open, make your determination of significance, and keep it open past that. So you have public input.
That's an interesting approach, yeah.
In any event, that's, so I don't want to get into the weeds about that, but if anybody needs an extended EAF, we're more than happy. And we realize we have to go to the Suffolk County Department of Health Services Bureau of Wastewater Management for the subdivision. And we'll also have to go. Interesting, well, it's interesting, I guess it's an interesting question, whether or not we need a
DPW?
No, whether or not we need a wetlands permit, because I'm not creating a lot. I mean, a tidal wetlands permit, I am not creating a lot line, am I? Within their jurisdiction. So I'm gonna have lot number one is gonna be, well, every part of lot number one is both more than 300 feet from the tidal wetland, and it's above the 10-foot contour. I mean,
I'd have to read the,
Yeah.
I'd have to read the DC
Yeah.
title.
I mean, it's not a big deal, more than meets their standards, but it's something that we might wanna look at.
Yeah.
That's all.
I mean, I think for our purposes, if we get to that point, unless we know otherwise, like if you have 11 non-jurisdiction, we would have to include DC as involved.
Okay, sure. Maybe I'll see if,
Yeah,
I'm gonna-
you
I'll
don't-
see if I
you
get
don't
a-
have jurisdiction.
I'll see if I get a limit on jurisdiction from them, but yeah, absent something like that, you have to include them as involved agency.
Just a question on the, so this is a sketch plan, right? The current sketch has 4 lots, right? That's the one that actually is the sketch plan, or is there a separate, because I was looking at the
The
upload.
actual plan we're looking at.
It's the 3 lot.
Right, but I've seen the 3 lots here.
I've seen the 4 lot too.
That's what I'm saying is the sketch plan that is uploaded with the application is a 4 lot plan. And that's why, at least what's available on our email that we received.
Okay, well, it's a 3 lot.
I understand that.
I think there were multiple pages in that.
Multiple pages, yeah.
I was looking and it's not,
Yeah, these all came as one package, but this is the one.
I've seen these, but these are not in the application.
I think these followed that. These were a later generation.
I'm looking in our SharePoint
No, David's correct, the
for the Serpentine.
Here's the actual
digital
application.
version
The
has
digital version does not have the.
just on the sketch plan.
This is what was filed on February 28th, 2025. 3 lot conceptual plan prepared by Enterprise dated February 4th, 2025.
Conceptual plan or conceptual yield plan?
I don't know. 4 lot yield plan, 4 lot yield plan. version A, version B. So I think, but whatever you need, whatever.
Yeah, I'm just saying is
For the sake
that,
of clarity, if you could change on the 3-lot plan, it says 3-lot conceptual yield plan. If you could just say 3-lot sketch plan.
Done. That removes any.
and just submit it, because right now it's like, it's confusing in our storage, like which is the actual one we're actually doing, right? 'Cause there's so
We're
many-
not looking at it before.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I assume so, but the only one we have is actually, preliminary plot is this 4. It's the only one uploaded and available.
So let me, to remove any sort of ambiguity,
I don't want this, I want like this.
the application is a 3-lot application.
Yeah.
And we will put on the InterScience 3-lot plan, we'll just call it a 3-lot sketch plan.
Thank you. Using trying to find this, like, I was trying to find this map like this. For 3, and it doesn't exist.
No, sure, it's in the InterScience stuff.
It exists like this.
Not
It doesn't,
at the
it
detail.
doesn't exist at this level of detail.
That wasn't part of the application.
I'm not saying it's quite, I'm just saying that's what I was looking for, because we had this, and that's why I was
I don't know
confused.
what's in your file. I know I have a February 28th application. That, in any event,
Look at it, it's good.
we'll get there.
Thank you.
We're in there. So. Right, where do we go from here?
What do you think?
Well, so we have a
Sorry.
sketch plan. I do think you gotta clarify what the sketch plan is right now.
Yeah.
This thing says yield plan.
Okay, so, but that's what it is.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not as familiar with your procedures at this point, but I would think have the applicant submit, make it clear what the sketch plan proposal is, and then discuss it in your next meeting, because you don't have that in front of you.
That's what I'd like to do.
Make sure you have it in front of you. It's the 3-lot conceptual plan that InterScience.
It doesn't say sketch plan, but you don't care.
If that's what your position is.
I think most of the board members, do I
That is
hear you? That's what
Yes,
everyone
that's
would
what I
like, so.
I wanted to get away from all of the different stuff and just say, what are you submitting? And this is it.
I am submitting.
I don't want it verbally, I want it
I
sent in.
did submit a 3-lot plan, and I'd be more than happy, as requested by Mr. Lombardi, to change the wording on it to sketch plan. But it's probably a good idea, since you have what I'm going to submit, other than adding one word to the map, in terms of, economy of time. Do you have any questions about the 3-lot plan? I will change 3-lot plan to say 3-lot sketch plan. That's, at this point, that's the only question I've been asked.
I have a question, Joe. Sure. The utility easement coming down from Serpentine Drive, is it really necessary? You don't want to put your utilities on the driveway?
You've got.
I realize this is long, but that's steep.
Yeah, that's where the water should come.
Water layer.
And the water main, yeah, there's no question about that. I don't wanna bring a main, I don't think the Heights wants to bring a main down there either.
Got it,
There's a
okay.
main in the bed of the,
All right.
there's one in the bed right there.
So Sunset Beach has no town water?
it is Western.
Yeah,
You would think it
Western
would.
Oh, I see.
Is Sunset
So
Beach
it's
out of the
Heights?
Heights?
It's
Might be out of the
water.
water, is it out of the Heights? If it's out of the Heights, it's.
So that's really a water line, it's really for water.
I don't think the Heights Association.
Oh, right, it's the bathrooms that are on West Neck Water, right?
Yes.
It's the bath, okay.
Is it in the Heights or they just in the
No,
water?
they're in the water district, so it's a different water district than Serpentine. Serpentine is the Heights, and then Crescent Beach, Bathroom, and Sunset Beach is on the West Neck Water District, very separate districts.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
What was that for?
I was just clarifying that Sunset Beach and the Crescent Beach Bathroom are on the West Neck Water District. Serpentine is on the Heights Water District, so they're two separate districts. That is within the Heights District.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. There's no question, because we at the request of the Heights district during the single family residence application, we gave them an awful lot of information. information about water usage, types of fixtures we're running. It's really well. And there's some calculation that they want, fixture numbers of water, so yeah, it's a height.
Right.
But I think the big lot on the water and the two lots up top, it seems to make the most sense.
Makes perfect sense. I have a question. I'm reluctant to go down the road because you're gonna get mad.
Ah. I just care when people ask irrelevant questions, 'cause I'm
It
very,
may be
very
irrelevant.
surgical about this, but anyway.
It may be irrelevant in terms of the decision, but when the original house was proposed at 12,000 roughly square feet, there was no maximum size in the
There was a
zoning.
maximum.
Yes,
size.
they came for special
If
permit.
you had more than 6,000 square feet, you had to go to the town board. That's where we went after we got all the
Okay.
town approvals. The town board took no action, so that's when we sued. And that's when the judge said, give them the permit.
Right.
Because the town let it sit and didn't act, I think eventually it was called capricious and.
So the
More to
ultimate approval of it wasn't based really on a town decision. They did it because the judge said you gotta do it because these
It was
guys.
based upon the zoning board, the DEC, the planning board's recommendation of the health department.
So my question then.
And it was also based upon the fact that I handled about 9 or 10 of them, if the town had approved about 38 similar applications.
How many, there are
38
38,
is not the
12,
decision.
there are 38, 12,000 square foot houses on Shelter
No,
Island.
there were 38 houses in excess of 6,000 square feet. There are
Okay,
probably
no, I live
about
across the
5 or
street from one
6.
of them, I know, and it's not a beautiful thing,
But
but.
there was a time.
So, I guess my question,
No,
Dr. Ahmed,
yeah.
is, in any way, was the approval of the 12,000 square foot house based on the fact it was on an 8-acre lot?
No,
How do you know that?
I guess because they didn't put any restriction in. If they had thought it, they should have put it in writing.
thank you,
Right.
thank you.
Or maybe it just didn't occur to them that anyone who could afford to build this house would want a smaller.
Well, that's the law. I mean,
No one ever asked that.
yeah.
No one ever asked that.
Financial.
I mean, that's, yeah. And I'm glad you're talking about that because it probably didn't occur to the town board because down at the end of Nostrand, I had about a year before obtained an approval for 11,000 square foot house on a parcel, don't hold me to this, somewhere between 60,000 and 70,000 square feet. So on an 8-acre parcel, where they had granted relief on parcels of somewhere between a sixth and a seventh of the size, it probably never occurred to anyone.
That he would further subdivide.
No, it probably never occurred to anybody to ask for any sort of restriction. On the Borthwick parcel, it's a private road that comes off of Nostrand.
Yeah, from a,
Yeah, there's an approval for, there's an approval, it's in my office somewhere, for a house much larger than 6,000 square feet on a parcel that's nowhere near the 8 acres. And then on a parcel.
Gentlemen,
Yeah, I'm gonna
Gentlemen,
ask that.
this is not germane to what we're doing.
Oh, I'm just trying to respond to the question.
We have more things to go over, we have an agenda,
Okay, Fox, I'm solely trying to respond to.
okay? And David?
I appreciate it.
David?
That's all.
Thank you.
Right, but I was just trying to respond, it wasn't, I didn't want to.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, so I'll put that legend on and we'll continue. That's it? That's all you want right now?
Yes, that's.
Okay, great. See you next time, next meeting? When is that?
13th of May.
15th of May? Great, thanks a lot, have a great day.
All right. Okay, next on the agenda is Chicwood Avenue LLC. So
Wait, excuse me,
Stella, I did notice that you had your hand up, but I just wanted to remind you and also the public that this is a work session, so we're not taking comment.
but
Taking comment.
Since the water district was referenced, I thought you'd want to hear from the water district.
I do, but actually I saw you, Stella, and I was just gonna say that I assumed you had your hand up because of the heights, and that you can certainly submit any, pertinent information regarding the water and sewage to us. And you can also, of course, speak at the public hearing,
Okay, it
not
just,
right now in the work session.
fine. It hasn't been approved, by the way, that's all.
Well, we'll get to that next week, hopefully. So,
Julie.
thank you.
Road.
Yellow and white.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, well, I mean, Roe, we actually did the sketch plan last meeting, so we're waiting on them, and we sent them back to take care of a few matters on their application.
Okay.
And the white performance bond, as always, it's just asked to keep it on the agenda as the town board moves through it, so. It's just due to my haste to trying to get to the next thing on the agenda, because we still have one more to go after that, so. So Greg and David, just for Cheekwood Avenue LLC, we'll just ask you to step back into the audience again, since you're not partaking in that discussion. Thank you. Anybody need water? Let me just get my notes out here, because I have these little things open. Sorry, I'll try to, as best as we can. Gentlemen, just give me a second to get some papers organized here, because
No problem.
the piles are growing in front of my desk. All right, so I had asked all of you just to have the criteria for wetlands permit issuance 129-5, there's the typical 1 through 6 that we usually abide by and go through. So if you could just have that handy. So I think I'm going to start with, just because I think it'd be easier. And I felt that just given all the history and all the time we spent on this application, I didn't want to just, risk speaking extemporaneously. So I prepared notes for myself. So just to help myself, just to help me keep organized on this. And then what I'll do is I'll just go first and give some concerns I have in terms of the criteria 4, 5, and 6, and I'll give my justification. And then I'm going to open up the floor to the other members, and I'd like to hear what you all have to say. And I just ask that just for efficiency's sake, that maybe not interrupt until I'm done, because then if I lose my train of thought, I got to start all over again, and Matt will kick me if I do that. All right, so basically, and again, this is just my opinion as one board member, but in taking into account all the testimony, all the submissions, everything, including the seeker testimony by the applicant, the applicant's representative, the engineer, Matt Sherman, I personally feel that the application did not adequately show sections 4, 5, and 6, and I'm going to explain why. And some things that I kept in mind as I gave a lot of time and effort to this application is that our responsibility, of course, is to protect the shared resource, which is our wetland. And that includes everything: insects, organisms, wildlife, fowl, vegetation. It's a whole ecosystem. It's named and it's protected in our current comprehensive plan. And I guess I feel personally that if we don't speak up for the wetlands, adhere to the law, go through the criteria, and instead simply concede by pushing papers, then I ask myself, what is the purpose of the board and why am I on it? We also tend to focus mostly on soil and vegetation disturbance of wetland development, runoff, water collection. As you know, these are things that we generally tend to focus on and talk about in our discussions. But another aspect of wetland protection is activity, noise, and lights. Those are also disturbances to wildlife and fowl. I won't bore you, but basically I made copies if anyone would like. There is a large body of scientific research on what I am referring to. And just for just to be concise, I probably listed about 11 or 12 scientific documents that will back up that statement that I just made. But basically, building inside the 100-foot setback impacts foraging and nesting behaviors and impedes animal corridor movement. It's also why we have this law of staying out of the 100-foot setback. The application fails for me again on criteria 4, 5, and 6. To begin, in reading Teresa Mason's report, where she suggested, instead of bringing in all the fill, to simply extend the steps to make them longer. I asked her, which is the lesser of the two evils? A few more steps of, say, 40 to 60 cubic yards of soil. And the reason I'm giving that range is that, as you know, when Matt submitted different revisions of the application, the cubic yardage changed, because as he changed the dry wells from 2 inches to 4 inches, that displaced some of that soil. So just to be fair to the applicant, I'm just giving a range of generally 40 to 60 cubic yards of soil. And Ms. Mason indicated to me that generally putting in materials for steps has less impact than trucking in soil. But the applicant's engineer seemed to, for whatever reason, just ignore that part of the memo. Mason also suggested beach grass, but the applicant wanted to go with clover fescue. And although that's fine, that's their choice, but I personally did not get an adequate explanation as to why they were ignoring that expert opinion. Moving on, we're looking at a 2,287 square foot dwelling, and I say that because, again, as you know, it's 1864 plus the 423 square footage of the covered porch, and we went from 80 cubic yards down to somewhere between 40 to 60 cubic yards of trucked in soil. And if you conceive of an oyster cage, because that's how I think, Marcus will follow me on that, because I know and I've worked with oyster cages on the boat. So that's just imagining 60 oyster cages stacked up with sandy soil being put in a place that can erode or flood. So I was saying to myself, where is the science which would provide a rationale for alternatives? That's part 5 of the criteria and 6. Whatever those alternatives were, that would maybe perhaps cause more detriment to the wetlands than the current proposal. Or I would have also been satisfied to hear testimony from a contractor or a builder with practical experience and expertise, making a case for alternatives having greater significant impact than the current proposal. But I didn't get any such reports. Teresa Mason's report advises the applicant to explore alternatives, and she also reiterated that the applicant provided no practical alternatives. Then the CAC memo of February 4th, 2025 recommended that the applicant stay clear of the 100-foot setback and propose alternatives. Again, a similar recommendation. On February 7th, the applicant's engineer asked that the former wetlands permits be considered and that the case project be reviewed and judged with the same criteria. I made a summary for you, which I have here, and you have it as well, of all of the cases that Matt Sherman Engineering asked us to consider as similar. But again, they were not apples to apples comparison. These were type 2 or unlisted actions, and the current application before us is a type 1. They also involved mostly renovations or additions to pre-existing buildings or addition of things like pool, patios, or sleeping quarters adjoined to a garage. They are not cases of a brand new dwelling over 2,000 square feet, not attached to anything else, and more importantly, not forced into its footprint by constraints on the property. On at least 2 occasions on the public record, the engineer stated, however, on his own volition, that each application should be judged on its own merits and circumstances, despite any argument for precedent. So the applicant's representative is aware and by his own recommendation supportive of that fact. Then on June 4th, 2025, at a public hearing, I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt to the applicant's engineer that perhaps there did exist a solid explanation as to why the alternatives more upland would be detrimental, or maybe they would cause severe hardship, either financially or environmentally. Because we have to rely on the professionals, obviously, experts, to give us that information for areas in which we don't have that expertise. And so to be impartial, I granted him that opportunity on record, figuring I could be convinced of facts that, had those facts been strong or scientifically or mathematically based. But in giving him the opportunity, instead, he stated that the plans that were before us were the ones to be considered and only those. And you'll recall that on June 13th, 2023, the applicant herself stated that she wanted a covered porch. To me, wanting a covered porch does not satisfy 129, sections 5 and 6. It's not my responsibility to create alternatives. It's the applicant's responsibility to show what they could be and why they do not work. And she has failed to do this. And even if one would want to argue that the increase in the buffer, the addition of the 4-inch rainfall dry wells, or the moving of the fence landward could satisfy criteria 4, the application for me still fails on 5 and 6. So that's where I stand on the application. And I appreciate you listening to my summary. I hate reading, but I just felt it was due diligence to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I open it up to anyone else who would like to offer their,
Well, there's no place else they can put it, you know? There's no place else on that property. If they go to the north, they're going into the vegetative buffer. If they go to the west, they go into the side yard setback. If they go to the south, they go into the front yard setback. They go to the east, they go into the swimming pool.
right.
The question is that you're assuming that what they're doing is static and that
has
you
to be
have to meet that, figure out where for that to go. And I think the logic is much further before that in terms of are there other alternatives and the like to creating what they want to create.
I would say one thing, and it's hard because there's the letter of the code as writ, which has lots of holes, as we know. And then there is, and they say Matt said, yeah, we should not do baseline precedent. There's a lot of precedent of building in the adjacent area. A huge amount. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there is a huge amount of precedent. If we apply the same rules to this application as we've had the multiple years I've been doing it, and what I've seen previously and what I've heard, the trade-offs that are being done would be considered adequate to show it. Because they're doing, they're willing to do things like, again, move back from the water side and to do, they did reduce the size of the property or the size of the build out compared to what it was originally. So they've done, and that you can say, well, that's an alternative. Yeah, but it's not the alternative I wanted to see, but it is an alternative to what was originally proposed. I'd also say that now that we've accepted a negative secra, the concern of runoff should be alive. It's like basically we've dealt with those by doing that. We've made a decision that that's okay. That it's not going to have substantial adverse effect. To me, if that had failed, then that'd be a no-brainer. Of course, we would not go forward. So now I say, now we go back to our standard procedure or conception around these specific points. I believe if we went by the letter of every single one of these exactly, that probably 90% of the things that have been approved over the last few years would not have gotten approved. It's generally always been a compromise of like, well, we'll give off on that if we get this. That's how we've gone. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm saying that's what we've done in the past, very much so, where it's like, well, we'd rather you not be in the adjacent area, right? Obviously, across the board. But this is the code we have today, which is you can build in the adjacent area. It is permitted. It requires a wetland, right? And then the question is do we hold this application to a different standard, a tighter standard of a reading of the code than we did others, right? And that's, to me, it's very hard because this is where it's like where we've before had people come in, build in the adjacent area and not give an alternative. I can guarantee you done that multiple times. So to hold this one because of that seems excessively just like we're looking for reasons to say no. I'm not saying we should be looking for reasons to say yes, but we should try to be consistent. I'm hoping the code changes that we basically would not allow building in the 100 feet at all. This wouldn't be a point, but that's not the code we live under today. So it's not fair to hold this applicant to a set of rules that don't exist, right? We have to go to the rules that we have. So, so to me, we saw practical alternatives. We didn't see any that were outside the regulated area because of the goals of the project. And those words to me told me that you can agree or disagree, but we allow people who build in their property, it's their property, to do so, within constraints. And to just say, just because you didn't do it the way we wanted it, doesn't seem right yet. So I think that's all I read. I think that there's this, and specifically in 6, it talks about practical alternatives that are constructed entirely outside the vegetative buffer are presumed to have less adverse effects in the wetlands than projects that do not meet such standards. Of course. I mean, to me, it's like, that's stating obvious, but it's not saying that you must provide practical alternatives outside the area. It's not saying that. It's saying the assumption is if you did that, it would be less adverse. But it's not saying you're not allowed to not do that, right? So again, this is all about the reading of the code, and kind of it's like, so I think they already did a practical alternative. Yes, it still is in the adjacent area. But the letter of the code, depending upon how you read it, there's lots of lawyers will read it different ways. I don't think it inherently, by just saying that, it doesn't apply. It's not okay. Which is very similar to where I was last time we went through this process. Not that I love our code. Everybody can tell, well, no, I hate our code. Our code sucks.
David, can I ask, what's the practical alternative that you kept referring to? You kept saying like.
So the practical alternative I saw was they came up with they changed the footprint. They reduced it.
Okay, so the footprint change?
Yeah, that's they accepted doing 4 foot instead of 2. They did many things that are practical alternatives to the plan based upon much of our feedback. Now, was it specifically getting out of the adjacent area? No. But that's alternative. They changed it. Now, it's not what you wanted, what some people may have wanted to see, which is 100% out adjacent area, but that's not what it says you have to do. It says you have to give alternatives.
So you're taking the interpretation that that part of 6 where it says anything outside of the vegetative buffer is presumed to have less impacts.
Of course.
The applicant
To me,
clearly demonstrates.
that's an obvious
This
statement.
is out of the vegetative buffer.
It's still, I know, but there's the vegetative buffer in the adjacent regulated area. Another thing you said, I didn't run through all the applications that he mentioned, but I did on that summary. I mean, I could go through each one and show you that it's not exactly the same. So I understand that there's building, there's building in the adjacent regulated area, but not a brand new structure, not forced in there by circumstances of the property. And we've had those other cases.
But to me, in all honesty, that's moot, because the issue is, are you in the adjacent area or not? Which I think is what in theory, we're doing the wetlands and worry about. And whether you're building a new structure or expanding structure, it's the same thing. You're doing construction in that area. You're disturbing soil. You're doing all the things you do in the adjacent area, which we have allowed to happen. Whether it's a new building or an expansion of a building into the adjacent area, we have allowed this to occur. And again, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying the code allows it. They've made changes based upon, in my reading of 5 and 6. So that's just my opinion based upon as one member.
I struggle with this, we've discussed this for so long and I struggle with it quite a bit. But I really do, and David, you make some amazing, very valid points, very important points. But I don't see the need for it to be in the adjacent I don't see the need to have that small amount in the adjacent.
What defines need?
Well, see, that's the thing, what defines practical, what defines alternative?
Exactly.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, because
I think
because you are permitted to build in the adjacent area.
if you've got,
If you get a wetlands permit, but, right, but I mean, we have permitted many things to be built. So so it's like, why was that need different than this need? Some other previous needs, right?
Run through what you
Yeah.
want.
it's hard to do because it's
I can
apples
tell
and
you why
oranges.
they're different. Do you
Yeah.
want to
Well-
offer, do you?
Well, maybe I'll have it,
All right.
if you don't mind, I'll go through some of my thought
Well,
process.
this is Matt, I didn't want to
You know,
cut you off.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
Did you want to? I felt
No,
like we needed to make sure
I mean,
we
I
covered.
agree with a lot of what you said, and David, I agree with a lot of what you
Yeah, it's
said.
hard, it's a hard play.
I just fall on I don't believe that this particular project, this particular building needs to have that small amount of square footage in the adjacent regulated area. I don't think it's necessary to achieve their goal or to achieve what I think is a practical goal. Obviously, they think it's necessary to achieve their goals. And now we're talking about adjusting people's goals for things. So
I know, yeah,
it's
it's hard.
very difficult.
It's the hard
And I
one.
don't do this flippantly. I don't do it without giving it a lot of thought. And I think it could be better. I think they can have a better alternative.
So maybe I can go through my logic or how I think about it a little bit. So first of all, I'll say I'm new to this role, so I'm stepping into this particular application at the end of the process. Everyone is aware of that, I'm sure. I will assure everyone that I have been paying very close attention to this application for quite some time. I've read the history. I've looked at probably all or most of the open hearings, so I am well versed. I'm not stepping into this ill-informed. There has been discussions about a potential lawsuit. I don't think that's a factor in any of our consideration at this point. The applicant did speak of previous wetland proposals, which you addressed, Julia. Again, having looked through them, I don't think that any of them are like-on-like comparisons. I remember specifically at some of the back and forth among the board members, there was the mention specifically of Shanty Bay that had I think a porch or a roof or something of the sort. And actually, if you look at that, to my recollection, Shanty Bay, it was actually a court order that approved that specific application. And within that specific court order, it says it's not to be used as precedent. So just for the record, in that regard. I think the seeker is an input to our consideration, but it's not determinative. It primarily addresses significance, and it's the planning board's job to consider the impact as a whole. And the code does not, to my knowledge, use the word significant when it talks about determinations. The code establishes a presumption of sorts that anything within the regulated buffer is a detriment. I think you said that. It basically says you're better, anything is better off not being in the buffer. I do think that to overcome a law that is basically a public good or protection, it implies some level of a burden or hardship on the homeowner to approve, and that's essentially criteria 5 and 6. I think when you look at some of the other approvals that were referenced, it is much more nuanced when it comes to, quirky shaped lots that were subdivided way before we had town code. And, where there are renovations to existing homes, where the homes were, put very close to the water, and they want to renovate in some way, shape, or form. That being said, I don't believe this process has been arbitrary or capricious for the homeowner. I don't believe the applicant has proved any level of real burden, and that a denial of their application would, deny them the reasonable use and enjoyment of their property. And that's where I think, this in many other applications, they're more nuanced, or they're renovating, or they're doing something, and it's like you're trying to figure out how to make them in something that's already there. How do they make a reasonable use and enjoyment of their property? I don't think telling them to build this smaller addition or building falls outside, is denying them reasonable use of their property. I don't believe in that context that they've really considered practical alternatives. Simply what I don't believe the standard is, well, what I want becomes the measure of how to find, alternatives. And so I agree with Julia, particularly as it relates to 5 and 6 not being met. And I guess I understand the nuances of some of what you've said. I guess my question would be, so I don't believe that the precedents you're citing are really kind of, like on like, or in that's really an issue with denying this application. If you lean towards approving it, I think the question would be, so the next guy comes along and he has 12 kids and 20 grandchildren. And so now he wants to build a similar structure like that, but it intrudes another 10 feet into the, bigger. What is your rationale to say no to that? If you've already said, if you're creating a standard that it's, well, what they want is, what you're judging practical alternatives to. And I just don't think that that's the intent of the law by any stretch of the imagination.
The only thing I would add, I have all the points. My problem is entirely with code. And my hope is before that occurred, the code will change. And then potentially this will help make the code get changed.
But do you think the intent of the code is that practical alternatives are just simply based on what the applicant wants and not whether it is whether there's a, reasonable use and enjoyment of their property? So when you're talking about like, oh, well, it's an existing intrusion into the wetlands and they're doing a renovation, it's harder to say you can't do this or that because, they're kind of stuck and it was built.
Whether it's a renovation or a new build is immaterial in the code. It is building in the adjacent area. Doesn't matter if it's brand new and you've never built there before, or it's a expansion of existing property.
Square footage.
It's independent. It's also square footage of that property and how much coverage you can have. This is well within legal coverage. Again, I'm not saying I agree with any of this. I'm just saying in the letter of the rules of the law as writ, and I also do believe they came up with an alternative compared to where they were when they started this. Now, is it as much as I want or we all want? It's like, no, but you can't just say, oh, I'm going to ding it because it's not practical. It's like, I think it is.
I think a very low bar, though, also in that area of someone says, well, I'll move this 6 inches, or something. Okay, well, that's an alternative. I mean, if we're constantly lowering the bar, you're creating.
I don't know if we're lowering the bar because I don't think it's ever been very high. So it's like, so when I look at how in the past we've done this process, it's generally always been more about, well, if they're going to be in the adjacent area, seems like a reasonable thing, but let's get some trade-offs that make it all better. We'll get an IA system, we get these, we'll have low flow. So basically it's always been around how do we make the overall wetlands better in this process?
Yep.
And some of the things they're doing it's like, it's not bad. So again, I think I wish I had better code.
Well, can I offer that when the law was created, they put in these criteria to guide us. So it wasn't like it was put in willy-nilly. about 5 and 6 practical alternatives. I mean, there's.
I think this was put in, I mean, you can go into why was this put in where it was when it was amended.
Pertain to here, because everything is outside of the vegetative buffer.
It's within the 100-foot
That's
setback.
not the vegetative buffer, it's the adjacent regulated area.
That's not what this is. This is just about the 75 and the 25, adjacent regulated and vegetative. And I want to state again that the applications that we've had, for example, down in Silver Beach, like remember Bootlegger's Alley, Carpe, right up against the wetland. They were doing like a house renovation. We have a lot of these cases where there's a pre-existing structure, a footprint, and they're trying to, add something on. That's different. That's being constrained by what was pre-existing before the wetlands code came about. That is far different from this, where you're putting up a separate dwelling. They're not being forced into that piece of the puzzle of the lot.
There's nothing in the code
oh,
about
no.
that. Let me present it to you another way. Give me an example of one time, anytime we denied expansion in the adjacent area.
The only things we've ever done is actually, that's not in the adjacent, it's always been in the actual.
Well,
That's in it, but-
on Tut Hill Drive, they came in with a lot more decking and a lot more gobbling up of that property. And
Which one?
And we made them roll it back.
Which one?
That was Tut Hill Drive. Do you remember, Matt?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't think of, Dune, maybe Dune.
That's 18 and 20.
Yeah, Dune was on, they were definitely going for a large sprawling deck area, and we did ask them, and that was in the adjacent regulated, and we did make them pull it back. But that was an example, again, of the horse trading, as David mentioned with.
That's the thing, it's like, but they're still in the adjacent area. So it's like.
Look, I'm going by Matt Sherman, the engineer, representative for the applicant, in his own words said, yes, I would like to make the case for all these precedents, but aside from that, the application should stand on its own. Those are his words, not mine.
Yeah, those are fine words.
So I'm judging this application with the information that I got, not on whether, Whipple was, using the same footprint and doing a small house renovation, or Shanty Bay was court ordered, so I can't, it's apples to oranges
I'm
comparison.
not looking at any of that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the code purely, independent.
Right, that's what I'm trying to do.
And are obviously different interpretation of the specific words, right? So I don't think you can just discount. I think there were alternatives. And the alternative they came up with, which is smaller, has a less adverse. They also did an alternative of increasing the wells thing. Basically, everything we asked them to do around those things, they did. And that's an alternative, right? It's an alternative. It's the site, it's the configuration. That's an alternative. Okay?
So you're judging alternative as possible mitigation.
To describe alternative site locations and configurations. That is what they did. Now, it's like configuration is configuration.
Configurations are not mitigation measures, like putting in fescue or putting
But the configuration of changing the size of the well for runoff, that's a configuration change.
That's a very narrow interpretation of the word configuration. That's in my opinion.
I think it's it's like many things for configuration. They changed the size of the actual property or the building as they went through the process. That is a configuration.
Okay.
And minor location change, but a change. And I think in the end, pardon me, finish. When Matt said, do it based upon, on what's been, this is what we're saying. Basically, he's saying, I'm not going to give you 37 other alternatives. Like, I've given you all these things, I've done changes, this is the one we want you to decide on. It wasn't saying, I don't want to do alternatives. It was, I've done all these changes the way I read it.
No, actually what he said was the plan before you is what we want.
Yes, that's what we want because we've already made these other changes through the process and they decided this is what they wanted us to decide on.
So the changes in the building, you'll note that it was taking away that part of the second floor, basically, a whole room, I think, was taken off. So,
That reduces the flow and need and space. It's like, it reduces square foot. It doesn't,
but it's interesting, it does reduce that, but it didn't pull back the footprint. It didn't take I mean, we're only talking about, what, 423 37 square foot into the buffer? It just chopped off one room and took off the top. It didn't pull it back in.
Not the buffer.
Sorry, the adjacent regulated, pardon me.
8 square feet.
yeah, there was a,
I'm saying,
there was a,
they just took off that.
there was a
upstairs. They-
minor delta in the adjacent area. Yes.
8 square feet.
Yes, but it was changed. So again, it's one of those, I'm not saying I love it, but I'm saying to say that you're saying no to this because you didn't get a practical alternative that you want, in a way you wanted, is just as bad as saying, I think, is what I'm saying, which is there's an alternative and at least they did something. It's sort of like, I don't know.
But so in cases, okay, let's just think of the one that we just had on Wheeler, Bay Shore.
I'm trying to not go on.
No, I'm just saying, like, where you have an existing building. We had a contractor come in, now not an expert, but an expert in terms of building and having practical experience, and explain that it's not practical to tear out the foundation and move the entire house upland. That's not a practical alternative. There are ways of showing, like, physical building alternatives that would not work, or that could possibly cause a detriment to the wetlands. And I was waiting for something like that to happen.
So we happen to manage that.
But can I just finish, assuming that I don't have the expertise, but the engineer does, I was hoping to hear, like, listen, if we move it here, or we put it here, or we put it here, this is actually going to cause more erosion, more runoff, more. But I never got that. And I offered him at least 2 opportunities to do that. And I did that to be fair, because I figured he knows more than I do. And I'm going to hear something that's going to convince me, okay, well, those are the alternatives and they're not going to work, obviously. But I never got that information.
It's something it's a level of alternatives that we've never asked at that extreme level anyone else that I've ever seen, right? It's like people come in, they say, this is what they want to do, we're in the area, we're going to expand out here, well, let's do trade-off. We never said, oh, other than when they get in the vegetative buffer, 100%, they're like, no, you're not going to do that. But on the 75 to 100, the vegetative buffer, we've been much more lenient around not needing 1,000 different alternatives. Or like, and I understand this is a very highly visible thing, and there's a lot of public issues around. So I believe that's part of the paying extreme attention to this. I get it. But in looking at the reading of the specific code, there's nothing that I see if you determine that what they consider practical, right? It's all about interpretation. And so it's like, how do you know?
Well, it's the weight that each board member gives to the criteria.
Yeah.
That was actually.
Well, I don't think it's the
very good
criteria.
advice that we got from our.
It's not even to the criteria. I think it's also.
What's the weight of what you're giving to probably that term practical, right?
And
I think that when you, I mean, I think, I've seen you guys discuss it, but I think, you have, at least from my perspective, you have to read through what the intent of the law is. And that is, it is not just based on because that's what I want. It is there. There has to be an underlying basis that is more related to reasonable use and enjoyment of your property, and that still can be a gray area. But for me, it's very clear in this case that they could just take a slightly smaller building, and they could not be in front of this, and that's not a burden or a hardship on them in any significant degree.
I think it's reading a lot into assuming where they're coming from. But to me, it's just like, I can express it, saying that trying to think, the word you expressed around that it is not a hardship, probably to say it. Again, it's the assuming that the alternatives that we want to see are a certain way.
No, the alternative, we want to see, the law says out of that area, more landward. It's right there.
No, that's not what it says. It says there's presumed.
This
To have-
applies to the vegetative buffer, not to the era.
Right, but 5 does, practical alternatives, allow the project to be constructed outside of the regulated area.
Then it's not here, it's clear here that it's the vegetative buffer.
Right, but 5 ties into 6 when you're talking about the vegetative buffer, but 5 applies to everything. Why have the 100-foot setback? Why are we here to protect the wetlands, or are we, like I said in my,
If we were here to protect the wetlands, it'd be 100 feet, not 75, or it'd be 300 feet, right? So again, it's the hard thing of this to me is, and this is the way this works, is the laws has to be interpreted by each of us individually, and we vote what we think is right, how we feel that within the constraints of what the law gives us as foundation in the construct. So,
Well said.
we also,
so I think we use these guys, and that's the same way we hit this before, right? When it was a different group of 5, we did this, but it's the same way we went through the same process, and I think we're kind of at that same point. So we each need to go into our gut and say, based upon this, the interpretation of the law, what's been presented, how do I feel is the right vote?
but also a good lesson, I think, that we learned from the court decision is that I didn't expect that outcome. So we had all deemed it a type 2 action. And I'm saying it came back as a type 1 action. So under someone else's eyes, their interpretation, they saw something in this application that we didn't see, that we all didn't see, right? So
Yeah,
I see it as
I guess
kind of I see, if I can just finish, I see it sort of as a karmic gift that we're given back this application. So now we have fresh eyes looking at it. I mean, it's our eyes again, but well, perhaps Sean's in this now, but we're looking at it again with a fresh perspective, like, okay, we're back here again. Obviously, things can happen to this application that we didn't even anticipate. So I went back and looked over it again and gave it my all to consider, okay, it's back to me again. Maybe there's a reason I need to think this over again. And I'm still coming to the same conclusion.
I understand.
We're ready to move to a vote? Or-
What's next, boss?
Well, we don't seem to have consensus.
Consensus is not required for a vote.
I was hoping,
If consensus is required for a vote, we'd never vote.
always optimistic. I would hope for consensus, but.
Well, my 2 simple questions I always ask is there any expansion in the vegetative buffer? In this case, there's 0, none. Second question, is the expansion in the era within the law? Yes, it is. The porch can do it. We're just a cog in the machine of the law. Where it comes from, this wetlands permit, it originates from the building department, who sends a letter of disapproval to the owner saying you need a wetlands permit for this expansion in the era. That's it. We grant them out all the time. And I don't know why we have to, single this person out.
Trying to single anybody out. Again, it's so simple. If they did not prepare 5, they did not satisfy 5. It's not, they did not bring enough evidence
They
to show
did.
me that.
Somebody suggested that they move it into the front yard setback. Can't do that. You can't violate zoning if you can build.
You can reduce the size of the structure, reduce the footprint. You don't have to move it.
Correct.
You need to reduce it.
But again, that's on them. I mean, I can tell you practical alternatives, but I'm not, it's not my job to. It's their job to show me.
That would
Correct.
take us out of the picture.
But I ask again, our responsibility is to follow this criteria. This is our safety net. That's why I have this thing on my desk all the time. And our job is our responsibility is to protect the wetlands. It's a shared resource. It's part of their property, but it's a shared resource. It's part of Shelter Island. it's named in our comprehensive plan. So if, I don't know what our duty is if we're just here to always just, say, well, it's not in the vegetative buffer and, well, that's the word straight.
The most important thing that we do is to follow the law, you know?
Right, but again, so Dave is interpreting the practical alternatives as some of the other measures and configurations that as you stated there. And I'm viewing it as practical alternatives, like actual architectural design, buildings, dwellings, alternative structures, placement of those structures.
But the wetland permit isn't just for the building of the building, it's all of the things you're doing in the wetlands. That's what the permit's for. It's not just to build, the building permit is to do the building. The wetlands permit is for how are you affecting the wetlands?
Yeah.
And that, in my mind, the alternatives that we've gone through, there's alternatives. They've done things.
Well, again, we had input from the CAC and we had input from the environment. No, if you want to say you don't.
No,
as much, that's
I'm
fine.
saying the CAC, I love their input. I wish they'd voted on it. I'm very disappointed.
They didn't vote on it. They sent.
No,
didn't vote on it.
they basically shied away from it. I was extremely unimpressed with the CAC, if you want to, because it's like, okay, fine. It's like, don't have a real opinion. But to me, it's like their whole value to us. In theory, they're supposed to be advising us and giving it, just like we used to do to the town board. They fell extremely short in the expectation that we used to hold ourselves to in providing the town board information and feedback on the wetlands. If they'd given it a strong, like, we voted, all of us say absolutely not, we should do it, that would have a lot more, but they didn't.
They did vote last time. When it was before, us before. When it-
2023.
Correct, yeah. But we had Teresa Mason's report, who is our designated environmental consultant, and even she said pretty much what I said about no practical alternatives. She advised the applicants to go back and seek those. It's in the memo.
And I think the applicant did things.
Yeah, we're going.
Well, we're going around.
No, and I say it's an
No,
interpretation.
I appreciate it. I think we're just going around in circles.
Yeah,
So
let's vote.
So,
Motion to vote?
yeah, I'd like to
Yes.
make a motion to vote on approving 7. Chickwood Avenue. No.
No?
No.
That's not where we're at.
Yes, go
Where are
ahead.
we at?
No, what I want to do is have a written determination, which I would do at the next meeting.
Right.
We should be voting with actual, findings and fact and all of that stuff, so.
But Rich, can I just ask, usually in preparing our resolutions, we note how everyone is voting in the draft before we do it. I mean, at least that's how we kind of.
So the way I see it is, I'm representing whatever the majority of the board is. If there are dissenters, they're free to write a dissent if they want to. They're fine.
Okay.
But to me, the determination is whatever the majority of the board is.
So I'm just trying to get a feel for that, I guess. So
Well,
perhaps I was incorrect to take an actual, vote.
And so how are we supposed to do it? Can
Yeah.
you tell us?
Well, I followed the discussion. What it sounds like to me, tell me if I'm wrong, okay? Sean does not think the application meets the special permit criteria. I think, Matthew, you do not seem to think that it meets the permit criteria. Julia, you don't think it meets the permit criteria. Marcus thinks that it does, and David thinks that it does. That's a 3-2 vote, and to not.
Okay,
So what I would do is I would write up a determination between now and our next meeting, a draft.
Okay.
Circulate it. You guys can review it. Any change if you want to, but I would do it. I can go back, I'm not taking notes, I can go back and I can watch, the tape on YouTube if I need to fill in the blanks. But I would write a determination denying the application based upon what you're telling me, the permit criteria in mind. Doesn't prevent the applicant from coming back with a new application. It's in essence what it sounds like is the majority of the board thinks that the part of the building, which is really basically the porch, as I understand it, that is within the regulated so-called buffer area.
adjacent regulated.
Yeah, the adjacent area, if you will, they use different terminology.
I know.
Yeah, that's part of our beauty code.
This is very much like the New York State DEC.
Yeah.
I don't like the DEC's approach either, but it is what it is.
Agreed.
So that seems, so the applicant, they can challenge the decision. They can go back and amend their decision and pull back and only build outside 100 feet. They might not even need a wetland permit at that point.
They wouldn't, right?
Exactly.
They wouldn't. So that's what I would propose to do based on the definitive method.
Okay.
And then we'll do a vote next month.
Then you would do the actual vote with the term, with the resolution. You can change your mind too, because it's not a final vote until, you vote on that resolution. And of course, if somebody changes their mind and reverses the decision, I would have to rewrite it.
Ooh.
So hopefully that doesn't happen.
Right, too. No, just kidding.
That's what I would propose to do. I have a written resolution for you. I'd circulate it beforehand. You can see it, add to it, subtract to it, change it.
Sounds good.
And then at the next meeting, you take an actual formal vote.
That sounds great.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Sit over there next time.
Yeah.
No.
All right, so the determinations, we're gonna write a resolution?
For next,
And
for next time,
okay.
yeah.
I'm just kind of wrapping
And
up,
we'll do a vote then.
and we'll do a vote.
Yeah, I guess I thought I needed to hear sort of a vote, I don't know.
I just
Because I was like,
vote first.
You're not obligated to make a decision now, and again, I don't want that decision made, I mean, look, it was a very good decision. You guys were referring to the code. I like the way you approached it. You didn't wing it, you tied things to the code, both sides. But I like, it's better to have, you want a written decision with all the explanation to back up. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna probably look at the different alternatives and that's what's.
Best way to do it.
Then we should do that.
I appreciate that.
okay, thank you. Wait, can we go to Goodson? It's not snowing this time, right? So, all right, gentlemen, come back in, David, we're gonna invite them back in.
Well, you guys wouldn't believe what you missed.
Okay, all right, so, Goodson, I think, Sean and.
I was gonna say, Julian, really good points now. Not me.
See, Marcus and Sean is Goodson, so, so I have a bunch of questions on this, but maybe I'll let you guys go first and say what you observed there.
Well, basically, the applicant wants to legalize some structures that a previous owner did that are illegal.
Yeah.
And it's a grill, it's part of a patio. There's a little gazebo that's in the street. And my question is like, how do you legalize something that's illegal? That's set a very bad precedent.
Yeah.
And it was not that it was done pre-code, it's just purely,
It's done after the code.
it's not actually, it's actually illegal.
Done without permit.
You don't want to turn it, yeah. In other words, if we had strong compliance, it never would have happened.
Well, I did contact Reed from the building department, test on that.
Speaking of compliance.
Huh?
Speaking of compliance.
Big point, and I can pass on that memo to you where he basically said there's no codified fines. And when the summons, I guess, is issued, it'll be up to a judge to decide what those fines would be. And when it came before the planning board, that was before my time, but you might have been on Goodson 20, yeah, you were here, maybe.
Oh, yeah, I wrote down Florida.
Yeah, so they, at that time, when it changed hands, apparently, there was a price reduction based on the fact that the first owner had not complied, and they passed it on to the buyer knowing this, and that reduced the price. So I guess at some point, I'm wondering why the summons wasn't issued yet, but I guess it will be when it goes. But in some cases, Reed was saying that the fine is really becomes, the fine is bringing everything into compliance, paying for your professionals, your lawyer, your application, going through the process. That's where you pay the fine, because it's going to probably cost you many thousands to bring it into compliance.
It's just different if that happens early on than it is. If you have, the use and enjoyment of it for 10 years, it's a whole different game.
Why aren't they required to mitigate the non-compliant conditions prior to a sale?
That's a.
If you're paying cash, nobody's gonna put an exception on
There's
it.
no mortgage on it, they're not, the title work is
Yeah.
They
sketchy.
got a discount for taking it in the condition it was.
Yeah,
Doesn't the building department review a structure now prior to?
they just have to do a occupancy, is all it is for the actual structure. They don't have to,
They reviewed to make sure the swimming pool fence is compliant, the gate is compliant, I believe, don't they?
I don't know if they do
To
something.
make sure that there are.
Those are all certificate of occupancy,
Yeah.
you know, inspections.
I've
never heard
asking
of it.
this as a question. I thought when there was a transfer of sale that the building department reviewed to make sure the C of O was up to date.
I don't know, I didn't have a C of O when I bought my house. It was built in 1921. Nobody had a C of O.
If the real estate agent's doing their due diligence, you check off all
Check
of
that
that.
stuff, but.
You don't let your seller or your buyer go into.
The C of O on sale would only be the case if it's required by your code.
Or your lender.
Lender.
Usually it's the lender drives it more than.
Right, the mortgage involved.
Lender that drives the bus and that.
The C of O, but it's cash. You don't have to do it unless, so some municipalities out here do require C of O on sale, not all, but some.
But I do know that they got a warning letter from the DEC and they did, yeah, they got a warning
About the
letter
gazebo,
about
because
the gazebo, yeah.
they,
They didn't issue any
got,
fines.
they got permission from the building department to build the gazebo because the 100-foot exemption. But the DEC has no jurisdiction beyond landward of the 14-foot contour. But they built it slightly seaward of the 14.
So that's how they got busted on. But so I asked Rita, that he said that they didn't, as far as he knows, they didn't fine them. They just sent them a warning letter and then they were supposed to, but they
gave up.
they probably just gave up, yeah.
So I had a number of questions that I think that ultimately either the builder or the homeowner or whoever is only going to be able to answer. I know the question of like, who did what and when? And I think we have some sense of that from the history, but I know you weren't clear whether the deck, how long the deck was there,
Well,
you know,
the
and whether
patio-
there was an
the
addition to the
patio-
deck,
Yeah, the
an
patio.
existing deck, and how much of the addition.
I can tell you the patio was built without a permit in 2007. The hot tub and the wood decking went in 2021 without a permit. That's in the
Yeah,
adjacent.
pretty recent.
So the question is, the current owner knew there were violations and just went at it for another try.
Kept violating.
Yeah.
And I don't think, well, I don't know, but it looks like he didn't do anything to it. It's just the last additions were the
2021.
wood oven, the oven, stone oven, the fireplace thing.
That was in 2007.
Yeah.
Right. There was still a wood deck constructed in 2021 without a permit.
Well, that's
And the permits-
That's between 75 and 100 feet.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That was in the area.
And then also, just to add to this quagmire here, in 2022, the permits were rescinded because the survey was wrong. Did you get that? I sent that to you last time.
The wetlands line was wrong.
So
Yes, it's significantly wrong.
Yes.
I would hope that this board and the current town board, this is the end of the line to a resolution for this, and that there's no withdrawing the application and this goes and hides again. Because for 10 years, that's just been negligent, that no one has addressed this. And so I think we're obligated to actually make sure there is
We
a
can add that to our memo.
resolution. You know,
We can add that
Yeah,
advice.
I think we should try to get them basically fix everything and everything you can. Do-
Well, when you say fix everything,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
Well, that's what Marco was asking,
Well,
how
that's
do we
a-
bring this into, so
Yeah.
I have some ideas, like, I mean, I don't know if you noticed in the video, well, you went to the property and,
Yeah.
I mean, I took the video for you all. When you come to the edge of where the gazebo is down at the dock,
Yep.
it's kind of steep there, I mean, it's like.
there's no vegetation.
There's no vegetation, so I personally think they need to do a robust vegetation plan along that whole thing there. That would be one way to bring it.
And the gutters just all run, they don't run into a dry well from, at all. They just run. So there are things that they can do, I think, potentially. I would say leaning in, my starting point is I would say, what is the thing that you most want to keep, if we're even willing to consider any mitigating measures for you to keep something? But you should be prepared that most of it's going to go, and, you know, do a gulp now, because.
Well, the big problem is by taking things out, you're disturbing the vegetative buffer.
Yeah.
So basically you can do as much damage removing as, actually more damage removing than.
Can I offer that-
But if you leave it, it's gonna make such a terrible precedent. you know?
No, I'm just saying, we have to realize.
But you're negating the requirement of mitigation after removal. So you're trying to have the mitigated condition, not the disturbed.
No, what I'm saying is that we have to realize by taking it out, we're causing more, basically, they're going to do more mitigation than just taking it out, because that would not, you're actually making it
It's in
worse.
the lawn. There's a
That's-
fireplace and sitting in the lawn. It's
Yeah.
not.
Right, so I thought
Incredibly
this about the
destructive.
extra, so this concept of the extra disturbance, so I mean, it's a bit of a wild idea maybe, but I was thinking, I found in the old documents, this is from the first wetlands memo on Goodson from us, from the plan, I wasn't on them, but 2022. There's a map right here where it shows, this was back in 2005, so this is after the wetlands code, right? I guess it looks like somebody marked in
Yeah.
where the gazebo went later. But if you look there, it's just the house, it's the deck. They didn't have the hot tub back then. They didn't have the oven and the patio work. They just had the pool and like a simple patio, just a little thing going around the pool edge. So my thought was, if you bring it back to what it was right after the wetlands code, this old drawing, it would be the deck area, which is actually in the adjacent regulated. You leave that. There's no hot tub. And then the pool is in the vegetative buffer, but it's just the pool. And in taking, right, and then I was thinking,
Without patio around it.
well, it has
It has
a
some patio,
very
just a
narrow,
little-
it's a
little
it's a
thing.
narrow, it's like the old patio. It's not the extra square piece that they added on. So if you take out the patio, the extension, the rectangle patio extension and the stove, the oven, take that out, that disturbance, you could put in dry wells. Because as far as I can see, did you notice that there's no dry well for the pool?
Yeah, well,
And there's no gutter runoff, I mean, there's no water capture, so I thought maybe it's a crazy idea, but how about if you're taking up all that stuff up anyway, that's where you can put your mitigation, you know, your dry well in there, and maybe some other ways to collect the storm water off the roof, and then do like an extensive vegetative plan. Now, even though you do disturb soil to put in vegetation, it's permanent. It's there, it's planting, it's just there, it's gonna hold, it's gonna take even greater
Yeah,
roots.
I think put it in and maybe put some covenants. Is that what they can do? Because the problem is they're gonna keep doing things. Like, I think we make it as strong as we can, but they can't do certain things. I don't know.
and your initial thought process is what with the gazebo?
That was
You
not
mentioned-
there, yeah, well, that was
You
not there in
mentioned the
2000.
fireplace gone and the, hot tub gone
And
and.
take the gazebo away.
They could
They don't get their 100 feet
I'm just
anymore.
trying to be fair and
Well-
just take it back to like, what was there
No, they have to
formerly
move it.
maybe
They have to
before?
move, okay, because they got okay from the building department to do it. They took the 100 square foot, but they had to move it landward by 3 feet.
But they never actually moved it.
No,
And the
You're
DEC
saying they could potentially keep it if they just moved it back a little bit.
because they get the 100
That could be their
square foot
100 for exemption.
And.
Well,
you
it's
see
pretty
no-
close to the pool as it is. I mean,
Yeah.
Is there room to move it back?
A few feet, yeah, they
Yes,
have.
there is.
Yeah,
I can look at the video, but I think.
yeah, they have room to move it a few feet if it's. Do we know that the dock is legal and permitted and everything?
That's actually
Not in our, not in our,
Well, it's just a more general question.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we're not
I
allowed.
think we can kind of guess, but no, we're not. It's like, that's the board, town board.
I'm sure it is, because you can't get away with that.
I wouldn't think so, but
The
given,
police boat goes back
given all the
and
things that
forth.
they've added,
Yeah.
nothing.
And the IA septic
Nighttime
that they're
pure
putting
waters.
in is in the front of the property, you saw that, right? So they're
Yeah,
closing out the
it's-
old septic,
yeah,
so that's not gonna be much disturbance, that's not anywhere near the wetlands on the other side. So I just figured if you're already gonna disturb this, to take out the structures that are not supposed to be there, you might as well do the mitigation in the same spot maybe, or try to, I mean, that's up to the engineer to,
It's not a
Figure out how
tremendous
to-
about amount of disturbance taking the stuff out, and they can do mitigating measures, you know, like wire belt silt fencing, they can.
Yeah.
well, that's what I'm saying, to do the plantings on, along where you have the steepness going down. But I don't know, how do you gentlemen feel about having them bring it back to what it was in this picture that I'm looking at 2005? I'm on page 7, by the way. of
We're
the-
talking about taking that out, right?
Taking that out, this patio was
Right.
added,
Right, new
not
patio.
legally. Leave just this thing in the
Leave that,
pool,
right.
take out the, move the gazebo as
back
per,
And get rid of the hot tub.
and get rid, the hot tub too, yeah. Because it wasn't supposed to be there, it wasn't there in 2005,
Well, and I assume,
just the
No,
deck,
the deck.
just the deck, there was nothing.
Right, no, but this deck is bigger.
And if you put in a dry well to pick up the gutters,
It's bigger, yeah, this deck is bigger,
The
actually.
deck is bigger than it was in
Yeah, the old
2005.
deck's
I would assume so, and I think all the cement work and stone, looks all to be uniform and one that they've expanded it very
you know,
significantly.
Yeah, I mean, and the surround, the cement or the stone patio around the pool looks like it's bigger too, not including
Yeah.
the new patio, the oven or whatever the hell it is,
Yep.
the barbecue.
well, what's the minimum you'd want your dry well from the edge of the creek? I would imagine the further back, the better.
That's why I'm thinking, well, maybe like where the hot tub is.
Well, the hot tub's sitting on grade. I mean,
I mean, I personally, I wouldn't, the idea
That's not my
of
job to figure out, but.
what the disturbance it creates by them taking out, I wouldn't be so personally obsessed with it, because like, I think what he was referring to is they can do hay bales and they can do all kinds of things that is mitigation for that specific action.
Yeah.
Then I think the idea of them being able to keep absolutely anything whatsoever, and maybe whether it's in lieu of fines or, whatever happens to be, is all these other longer term mitigation measures that just make good common sense, like dry well and plantings and.
Well, you'd want him to get on board that this is the right thing to do with your house, because it'll make all this stuff, you get a mortgage, if you want to sell the house, it's like, it's
Yes.
increase the value.
It is a plus, right, if he goes to sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a hot tub's not gonna add that much.
Well, if anyone wants to do any renovations to the house, they have to comply
Yeah.
in order to get a revised,
Yep. I think
So,
we should include Reed on the station, since that's an experience.
yeah, well, he sent that email, which I forwarded to you,
Yeah, that's good.
so.
He's good. And he was on the planning board, so he.
He was, yeah. Actually, he was on the
you need a building
application.
Permit to put in the septic?
No, you need a.
It's just, I know you need health department,
Health
He needed a health
department.
department.
but you don't need a.
But that's on, you saw that's on the front portion of the property, so.
No, if there are violations, then they wouldn't be able to pull permits.
All right, so.
But you also noticed too that there were lights down
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
they-
on the
edge of the
gazebo.
property.
There was lights in the
and
gazebo.
in the kind of facing the non-existing plantings, at the very edge of the property, so.
There was non-compliant dark skies lighting pointing up into the
Oh,
skies.
okay, all right.
So I take it you're just gonna write a memo based on what Marcus did before, or are we?
Yeah.
writing?
Yeah, he's gonna actually.
I'll write up
send me a
something,
few notes.
I'll send it to him, see if
Okay.
Sean likes it, and we'll get it to you. And then you
Yeah.
decide.
That'd be tough, sure, that's good. So basically, we're
I
saying,
have like a skeleton, just.
yeah, so the basic idea is like, get rid of all the weird shit you're not supposed to have. Yes, do
It's
the.
getting late,
yeah,
David, I can see you slipping.
It's a technical term. We're talking about an IA system.
We'll get a little
Industry
weird.
But how do we get the exact measurements of what deck existed there before and what cement was surrounding,
that's not
like,
good.
So this is 2005, right?
This is 2005.
So remember, wetlands
Yeah.
came in August of 2001.
One, yeah.
So we got to find a photograph.
We have the GIS. for that.
I think it's in the 2020. Here.
So it's
21.
historic.
Oh, you got it?
yeah.
It's in the.
Yeah, but it's still, you're still gonna say that it looks like 2 feet like around the patio, like what? I mean, and that's fine if that's how we're gonna just do our best to make a determination of what was there before, if someone has.
I think we're making an advisement
This
to
is
the
an
town,
advisory.
Yeah.
only,
to the
so-
board, and the board gets to figure out
It
where they draw the line.
Then can you
That's a
guys
great thing.
figure out the
Right.
specifics on
We
it?
get it easy, we could pretend.
All right.
You could even not vote, and just kind of just write something out, figure it out. First advisory, it's awesome.
Okay, so is that good? So I'll wait to get the notes from, you'll
Yeah, I'll-
disseminate, you'll give it to Sean, you guys
Yeah.
look it over, send it to me, and then I'll pass around the memo to everybody else. Can I just ask that we, Meg, is there, like, how much time do, like, I try to do a
When's the public
48-hour
hearing for this?
turnaround, but we don't have that urgency, like, when are you?
Isn't it in June?
You know what, I don't know what.
But we have like a week at least, right? Okay, all right, so there's no rush. All right, so can I have a motion to close the meeting? Is there anything else? Or-
Make a motion to close the meeting.
Okay, all in favor?
Second at first.
Second.
Wise.
We're so anxious.